Welcome back to Grimoire Audiobooks. Today, we continue the thrilling adventure of Harry Potter and the Masters of Time, a captivating fanfiction by Sarah 1281. In this section, Part 2, covering chapters 11 to 20, Harry's journey through time intensifies. Secrets are revealed, alliances shift, and the clock is ticking as dark forces threaten to disrupt the magical world. Harry and his companions face new challenges that could alter the course of history forever. Sarah 1281, a master of blending intricate time travel plots with beloved characters, brings us a fresh and exciting take on the wizarding world. With a unique narrative style, Sarah 1281 excels at creating suspense and deep emotional connections between characters. Disclaimer: this fanfiction is a transformative work based on J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. All original characters, settings, and trademarks belong to their respective owners. This reading is created purely for entertainment, with no copyright infringement intended. So, sit back, relax, and prepare for a time-twisting journey with Harry Potter and the Masters of Time by Sarah 1281 at Grimoire Audiobooks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more magical adventures. Let's dive into the next chapters. Chapter 11. Gone. Sirius repeated hollowly later that night when Harry snuck out to meet him. Gone? What do you mean he's gone? Harry sighed. I suppose it was too much to hope for that you had completely ignored my explicit instructions and taken them early. Why would I have? You said you were going to take care of it, Sirius pointed out. I still can't believe he's gone. I mean, I was so close, and now he's gone. Not he, Harry corrected. They. The diary Horcrux is gone, too. Sirius groaned. You know, I may have been rotting away in Azkaban at this point the last time you were a second year, but given that Wormtail was with the Weasleys in Egypt, I can still be fairly certain that this didn't happen. You're right, Harry agreed. The only question is, why did it happen? Why would Pettigrew have taken off with the diaries? Sirius shot Harry a look. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it was when you announced that I was your pet Padfoot. Maybe even though Wormtail managed to not spook when I escaped Azkaban because I didn't really show any inclination to make your life harder by showing a vested interest in getting into Hogwarts, he heard my name and decided that it was either the most incredible coincidence or I was here and out to get him. As to why he took the diary, I don't know. Maybe he recognized it from when Voldemort gave it to Lucius. Harry glared at Sirius, completely ignoring the last part of his statement. Well, maybe that wasn't the best idea to call you that, but I don't recall you coming up with any better suggestions. Sure I did, Sirius argued. What, Snuffles? Sorry, Sirius. No pet of mine will ever go by such a cutesy name. Seriously, if you want me to come up with a more badass way to have survived Voldemort than the power of love, then you've got to come up with a more badass alias than Snuffles. Seriously, that sounds like something Ginny would have picked out. Sirius started laughing. Really? She can't have been that bad. Wanna bet? We got a rabbit last year, and guess what Ginny named it? Flopsy. Dubby, what did you want to call it? Sirius managed to ask between his laughter. Mega Ultra Flame Deathsman. Hey, that's a perfectly respectable name for a rabbit. Harry insisted, crossing his arms as Sirius literally fell to the ground howling. You know, if you're not going to take this seriously, I'm going back to bed. After a few moments, Sirius composed himself. But Harry, I'm always Siri Dash. One serious pun, and I'm going back to bed, Harry warned. Fine. Sirius pouted. So, what are we going to do? We know that Pettigrew is off somewhere with the diary, but we don't know if he knows it's a Horcrux or not. Probably not. After all, if the likes of Lucius Malfoy and Bellatrix Lestrange, who, by all accounts, were two of Voldemort's favorites, never knew, I can't imagine why a spy would be told. No one ever trusts a spy. After all, if they can be a double agent, they can be a triple agent just as easily. Speaking of Dash, Sirius began. Harry rolled his eyes. Yes, Sirius, I'm positive Snape really is on our side. You really should let this go. It's not healthy to carry a grudge for 20 years or so. Try telling that to him. Sirius muttered. Well, to be fair, you did try to kill him when he was 16, and that was probably very traumatic, Harry said diplomatically. I mean, I know I was traumatized when Remus transformed that night at the Shrieking Shack, and he didn't even get a chance to try and kill me. Thanks for that, by the way. Don't mention it. After all, what are godfathers for? And I do tell him this. On a regular basis. But to my credit, I think I've managed to annoy him so much that he's somewhat stopped seeing me as my father and now sees me as my own extremely irritating person, Harry said proudly. With a little effort, he'd managed in 1 year what he previously hadn't been able to accomplish in 6. Way to go, Sirius said appreciatively. Getting back on topic, even though Wormtail won't know what the diary is, he'll probably end up writing in it at some point. When he does, he'll realize that this is the closest he's going to get to Voldemort's orders. He'll keep writing and probably get possessed. When he does, Harry sighed heavily. When he does, the Chamber of Secrets will probably be opened again. Harry knew he had forgotten something. It was bugging him all morning. He just couldn't quite remember what it was. This was a rare instance in which Neville's remembrall might have been useful, except that Harry already knew that he'd forgotten something, and as the magical mood ring wouldn't tell him what exactly he'd forgotten, Harry knew he'd probably have just gotten frustrated and thrown it. Of course, it wasn't realistic to expect Harry to remember everything. On the other hand, now the platform had sealed itself, and he and Ron were trapped outside while everyone else was trapped inside, and the train had just left. Last time, of course, they'd flown the Weasleys' car to school. Of course, that was incredibly dangerous and highly irresponsible, and they should really wait for Ron's parents and, oh, who was he kidding? I'll drive. Climbing into the passenger seat, Ron looked at Harry skeptically. Do you even know how to drive? Of course, Harry said matter-of-factly. Everyone who's lived in the Muggle world knows how to drive. So it's like the Muggle version of flying? Ron asked as Harry took off. Kind of. Harry lied. He did, in fact, know how to drive, having been bullied into getting a license by Hermione shortly after he defeated Voldemort. They have a sport based on it at any rate. Like Quidditch? A little. It's more about racing the cars and hoping they don't crash into each other or into the wall or spontaneously combust in the process, Harry explained. Muggles are strange, Ron commented. That they are, Ron. That they are, Harry said absently as he sped up, looking for the train. It was pretty simple, just following the tracks. After about 10 minutes, they found had caught up to the express. Harry started to slowly descend, aiming to land on the top of the train. Are you crazy? You can't land here, Ron shouted. Why not? Harry asked innocently. You'll get us both killed. Oh, I will not. It'll be fine. See? To prove his point, Harry slowly brought them down to the last compartment. The landing was a little bumpy, but then the train was moving at roughly 60 miles an hour. Ron looked green and stumbled out of the car and to the edge of the train. He then promptly vomited. Harry wrinkled his nose. Nice. How about you go first, he suggested, helping Ron down into the compartment below them. Once his friend was out of sight, Harry took out his wand, tapped the car, and whispered, Portus. Harry watched the car vanish with some satisfaction. It had taken him a while to get the hang of that spell. He then followed Ron into the compartment below them. A stray spell immediately grazed his ear. What the hell? Harry asked, looking around. He groaned. Of course, they had picked the second-year Slytherins' compartment. Can you guys just chill for a second? Chill. Draco repeated. What does that mean? Oh, never mind, Harry said, deciding it was best not to mention that was Muggle slang. Why are you guys attacking each other? I was only up there for 2 minutes. We were minding our own business when suddenly a Gryffindor fell from the sky. We thought we were under attack. A blonde Slytherin girl Harry vaguely recognized as Daphne Greengrass told him innocently. It was 9-on-1. How can that possibly be considered self-defense? Harry asked curiously. We thought it was a Weasley invasion and the rest of his siblings would follow him. A redhead Harry was fairly certain was Tracy Davis explained. He really should pay more attention to the students in his year. Harry rolled his eyes. I'm sure. Anyway, Ron, I got rid of the car, so, with any luck, your parents will just think that they're going crazy and we didn't take the car. How did you get rid of the cars? Ron asked, confused. I don't think we learned any spells to do that last year. Magic. Yeah, I kinda got that part. But how exactly did you dash? Am I to understand that you flew a car from King's Cross Station to here? Draco interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Yep, Harry beamed. Is there any point in asking why? Remember when I asked you to order Dobby not to steal my mail? Harry asked. Draco nodded. Well, I forgot to ask you to have him not try to save my life, Harry explained. So, you flew a car to the Hogwarts Express because my house elf wants to save your life? Draco repeated incredulously. Basically. You're going to need to explain that, Draco said bluntly. Harry sighed theatrically. He's apparently gotten it into his head that Hogwarts is a walking death trap, and therefore I'm better off with my Muggle relatives, and in particular my Muggle uncle who could snap at any time and try and strangle me. Therefore, he sealed the portal to the platform and Ron and I got bored, so we decided not to wait for everyone to fix the mess and just fly here. Draco just stared at him. That has got to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and that is a fine example of the pot calling the kettle black. Seriously, though, you sound like Hermione. Draco just made a face at him. Do you think he'll try to, save your life again? Almost certainly. Right, this is bloody ridiculous.
Dobby.
Draco called. Yes, masters? Dobby asked hesitantly when he appeared. I order you to stop trying to save Harry's life. It's very annoying. Just let him stay at Hogwarts. Got that? Why yes, Master Draco, Dobby said, his ears drooping. Great, now go. With a pop, Dobby was gone. Thanks, Harry said, relieved. I really owe you one. Draco waved it aside. Don't mention it. Just get the weasel out of my compartment before we're forced to hex him again.
Okay.
By Draco. By rest of the second-year Slytherins I don't like as much as Draco, Harry waved cheerfully as he dragged Ron to the next compartment. The next compartment they tried had Cedric and Cho Chang in it, flirting shamelessly. Then they came across the Weasley twins, Lee Jordan, Angelina Johnson, Alicia Spinnet, and Katie Bell examining the twins' pranking supplies. They encountered Oliver Wood and Percy playing wizarding chess. Oliver had made some comment about how it was nice that they won the cup last year, because that was the first time they had won since Charlie Weasley left. Percy had pointed out that Charlie had only graduated 2 years ago, and Oliver threw a book at his head. In fact, it seemed like they had passed most of the Hogwarts population before they finally came across Hermione and Neville, who were sitting in one of the first compartments with Ginny and Luna Lovegood. There you are, Harry said, exasperated. We've been looking everywhere for you. I think that's my line, Hermione said, amused. Neville and I looked up and down the train for you twice before we finally just grabbed this compartment. You were supposed to follow Mum and I through the portal, but we didn't see you, Ginny pointed out. That's because the platform sealed itself and we flew Dad's car to the Hogwarts Express, Ron said bluntly. You did what? I take it you don't approve? Harry asked mildly. Of course I don't approve. You could have been spotted. Or killed. Or expelled. Hermione finished, looking horrified. We've already been over this, Hermione, Harry said gently. It'll take a lot more than that to expel someone. Especially me. Hell, my godfather didn't get expelled for trying to feed Professor Snape to a werewolf. Isn't your godfather Sirius Black? Ron asked. Harry had forgotten that he had mentioned that on Christmas to Ron, the twins, Percy, and Tonks. He supposed he was fortunate that Tonks had forgotten that when he mentioned that Sirius, in dog form, was his godfather. Well, either that, or she thought he was joking. Otherwise he might have had problems. Oh, well, yes, he finally managed to say. Hermione looked even more horrified. Dear God, he tried to feed Professor Snape to a werewolf and was still allowed to attend Hogwarts? What was Dumbledore thinking? Harry shrugged. Everyone short of Voldemort deserves 53 chances? Why 53? Neville asked. It's a nice, even number. No, it's not, Neville said, confused. That's not the point. The point is, We totally flew Ron's dad's car halfway to school, and then I used my incredible awesomeness to send it back. As long as you didn't tell anyone, I guess we can just pretend that it never happened then, Hermione said reluctantly.
She paused.
Wait, you didn't tell anyone, did you? Ron and Harry looked at each other for a minute. Then Ron quickly asked his sister about what she thought of the Hogwarts experience thus far, and Harry introduced himself to Luna. Neville was thus left to try and calm Hermione down. After all, they'd totally told everyone they happened to come across. The welcoming feast was very nice, no less because he hadn't been expecting to get to attend it when he and Ron had initially taken the car. Harry cheered loudly when Ginny made it to Gryffindor, and he also convinced Fred, George, Hermione, Neville, and Ron to cheer with him when Luna made it to Ravenclaw. That attracted some strange looks as no one ever cheered for anyone not in their house, but when had that ever stopped Harry? Best of all, he was receiving some suspicious looks from the staff. No doubt they had heard the rumors of his and Ron having commandeered Ron's parents' flying car, but as none of the Slytherins who saw them enter the train felt particularly inclined to tattle, there was really nothing they could do. Harry was a bit tired from the all-night Harry and Ron flew a car halfway to Hogwarts and got away with it party in the common room, but he was overall quite cheerful the next morning. Everyone had been there, even Percy, who Harry had to spend 20 minutes convincing that their little excursion was just an excuse to hold a party, and if they had just ridden the train like everyone else, they would have been celebrating the welcoming feast. Harry looked up from his breakfast in time to see the Weasley family owl, Errol, practically collapse in front of Ron. And what's more, it had a howler in its beak. Ron turned pale, and everyone in the Great Hall, who had looked up at the sight of Errol practically dying, looked torn between leaning closer to hear what Ron's parents were going to say about the incident or running from the room. Seriously, howlers were annoying. Yes, it was plenty embarrassing for the person receiving them, but the parents should really keep their admonishments more private. Not to mention that everyone in the Great Hall didn't particularly care to hear a lecture every time any student screwed up. Fortunately, Harry solved their dilemma for them. He casually opened the letter, and it started screeching Ronald Bilious Weasley. Of course, that was as far as it got, as Harry quickly tapped the howler and whispered, Muffliato. The howler was still going, but no one could hear it anymore. Well, no one but him. Still, small price to pay for the way everyone was looking at him in awe at how he had defeated a howler. Oh, and he saved Ron the embarrassment of getting chewed out by his mother in front of everybody. That was nice, too. And did he hear some murmurs already of the boy who silenced? Wizards sure did love their hyphens. Chapter 12. As Professor McGonagall handed out the schedules, she paused to inform Harry and Ron that Ron's parents had fled over their trunks. Surprisingly, Harry had completely forgotten that he'd left the trunks in the car when he'd sent it back, and so he hadn't even been worried. He probably would have noticed that they didn't have any belongings at the school except that the all-night party had ended just half an hour ago, so there really hadn't been time. That would explain how Mrs. Weasley knew that they'd taken the car, though. Ah well, the lack of supplies could have been really bad, but catastrophe averted. Hermione had wanted to head out to the greenhouses early, but Ron and Harry insisted on going back for their supplies. According to her, they shouldn't have been so irresponsible as to forget them. But, well, they were. Once they finally reached the greenhouses, they saw the rest of the class already standing outside, and pointing and laughing at the panicked expression on Ron, Neville, and Hermione's faces as the four raced across the grounds. Harry, on the other hand, would have preferred being late, as that almost certainly would have ended up meaning a loss of house points. Speaking of, maybe he should admit to hijacking the car after all. That should be good for at least 100 points lost. Still, Harry wasn't quite sure if that would be worth the one more toe out of line threat or giving up the notoriety of getting away with it. Professor Sprout didn't even seem to notice their tardiness, however, as she was too busy trying to see just how much her body language could scream, "Go away," and "Shut up, I don't care," to Gilderoy Lockhart before he'd take a hint. Unfortunately for her, Lockhart was immune to such mundane things as whether or not his listener was seconds away from stabbing him with a spade. Greenhouse 3 today, chaps. Professor Sprout managed to get out when Lockhart paused to take a breath. When Lockhart's eyes swept over the class appraisingly, she made good her escape. Harry, still looking to lose points, took his time and paid for that dearly. No sooner had he begun to lag behind than Lockhart spotted him. "Harry!" Lockhart shouted, sounding far more enthusiastic than he had any right being. "I've been wanting a word. You don't mind if he's a couple minutes late, do you?" "Oh dear, I do believe she's left already." "Well, I'm sure she won't mind at any rate." He eyed Harry critically. "Harry. When I heard, well, of course, it was all my fault. Could have kicked myself. Don't know when I've been more shocked. Flying a car to Hogwarts. Actually, Professor, the rumor is that I flew a car to the Express. And I'm not actually admitting to anything, mind you, so you don't need to worry that people will think you've been a bad influence on me," Harry reassured him, wondering vaguely why Lockhart felt the need to keep saying his name. It was kind of creepy. And rather irritating. He didn't like his name that much. Lockhart chuckled. Of course. It'll be our little secret. Still, of course, I knew at once why you'd done it. Stood out a mile. Harry. Harry twitched. Seriously, if Lockhart didn't quit this annoying habit of repeating his name over and over and sounding rather perverted, Harry couldn't possibly be held responsible for his actions during the Cornish pixie lesson he supposed was the word, but they really hadn't learned anything except Hermione was smarter than their defense against the dark arts professor, and really, hadn't they all already thought that? Well, the male students, at least. And the non-enamored females. Because I under the mistaken impression that you were Draco Malfoy, you didn't get to make the front page with me, and so you had no choice but to fly a car to the Express in order to finally get that publicity I just know you've been craving. Lockhart beamed, clearly proud. Harry just stared at Lockhart. Did he even read the paper? But I didn't make the front page. It wasn't even mentioned in the paper at all, because no one has any proof that there's more truth in that than the persistent rumors that my Draco Malfoy is the love child of Narcissa Malfoy and Professor Snape. Lockhart chuckled. Yes. I did hear about that. I didn't want to say anything, of course, but I've always suspected, in fact. I made sure to mention that fact in my autobiography. Now everyone can know the truth of such a touching love story. Why, it's a modern-day Romeo and Juliet, isn't it? Harry had to fight to the urge to burst out laughing. Oh, Draco was going to kill him. I feel obligated to warn you not to let the fame go to your head. You're still young, you should take it easy, all right? You'll have plenty of time to figure out what you want to be famous for, how to go about accomplishing that, and how to manage your fame when you're older. Getting yourself expelled for pulling stunts like these, well, it will certainly earn you a little notoriety in the short term, but it won't last, and it will put a damper on any and all future plans, Lockhart told him seriously. Harry was shocked. He had no idea that Lockhart had put this much thought into cultivating his fame, but he supposed it made sense. After all, he'd as good as admitted that the only aspect of magic he was particularly proficient in was memory charms, so to have built up the reputation he had only on the strength of one spell, well, that was damn impressive, Harry was forced to acknowledge. And you need to be even more careful because a few people have heard of you, haven't they? All that business with he who must not be named. Lockhart laughed. I know, it's not quite as good as winning Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile award 5 times in a row, as I have, but it's a start, Harry, it's a start. Dear God, Harry had been so confused and affronted that Lockhart thought he was just attention-seeking that he hadn't even realized, but Lockhart was joking. He didn't actually think that a smiling competition was more fame-worthy than mysteriously vanishing Voldemort. Maybe he wasn't such an idiot after all. Granted, he was still practically a squib, too self-centered to pay attention to what anyone else thought of him, and unscrupulous as hell, but definitely not an idiot. Professor, Harry began as Lockhart was about to walk away. Your style of fame seems to be the popularity contest kind. I mean, yes, your books detail the adventures of you dealing with Yeti, werewolves, vampires, and several other assortments of magical creatures, but that all seems to be besides the point, isn't it? Your readers don't buy the books because they really care about all of that. They just like you, and your heroic deeds are just an excuse for them to get to hear more about you and keep you in the public eye. You make sure that you're always in the back of people's minds by winning contests like the Witch Weekly one you told me about. It's quite a clever strategy, and if you don't do something really stupid, it should be able to evolve with the times and keep you in the public eye for as long as you choose to be so. Lockhart stared at Harry incredulously for a moment before he smirked. Impressive. I take it that's not your style. Harry shook his head. No, I don't need to worry about people forgetting me because that's just never going to happen, at least not in my lifetime. I disappeared from the magical world for 10 years immediately following my ascension to hero status, and yet parents have been telling their children bedtime stories about me all this time, despite the fact that no one even knew anything about what happened that night at Godric's Hollow. I don't need to remind people that I exist, and since everyone is so enamored with me already, I can just basically do whatever I feel like, because unless I do something really stupid, the bad PR resulting from expelling me, or anything of the sorts, would just make it not worth it. Using this immunity, I can bolster my fame and popularity among my peers by such daring escapades as last year's Little Treasure Hunt and allegedly flying a car to the Hogwarts Express. That's a little callous, don't you think? Lockhart asked, not bothered in the slightest. Harry shrugged. Perhaps. Don't get me wrong, I would do anything for my friends, and I wouldn't just leave them to suffer the consequences that I can evade using my fame, but I have to be careful. If I don't carefully navigate things, then what's to stop some gossip-mongering journalist or pissed-off bureaucrat from doing irreparable harm to my reputation and making sure I'm not in a position to be able to help the people I need to? It's called being proactive. Well, you clearly know what you're doing, so I wish you well. May both of our fames continue to grow in the years to come, Lockhart told him sincerely, and continued on his way. Harry shook his head to clear it. Having a serious discussion with Lockhart was not something that he had ever thought he'd do, in either timeline.
Well.
He was far certain that he was far more than just fashionably late, so maybe he would get some points taken off after all. When Harry entered the greenhouse, Professor Sprout was just about to unpot a mandrake. When she saw Harry slip in, she stopped and took her earmuffs off. And where were you? I was chatting with Professor Lockhart about how famous we both are, Harry deadpanned. Professor Sprout narrowed her eyes. I see. 10 points from Gryffindor for your tardiness, Mr. Potter. You can discuss your fame on your own time. Yes. Harry cheered as he slid into a seat next to Neville. I wouldn't get too excited, Neville told him. Hermione earned 50 while we were waiting for you. Harry threw his head back and wailed. And oh, hello. Curses, foiled again. How could you, Hermione? I thought we were supposed to be friends. Hermione just rolled her eyes. You'll get over it. Face it, mate, Ron told him frankly. Dumbledore likes you way too much to let you lose the House Cup. Or hates me too much. Harry muttered. Ron ignored him. Even if you and Snape do manage to end the year at 100 points or so dash. And the lowest house point total ever was 116, and that was Gryffindor 1978, Hermione interrupted. Harry couldn't help a quick smile from flitting across his face. That was the Marauders' 7th year, and clearly they'd gone out with a bang. Right, Ron nodded. Even if you managed that, Dumbledore would still end up giving Gryffindor 400 points for whatever really stupid thing you, and anyone stupid enough to go along with you without any sort of explanation beyond your Scar said it was a good idea, felt the need to do that will land you in the hospital wing for the entire last week of school. Harry hung his head, knowing they were right. Right, so if Mr. Potter has been brought up to speed, everyone put your earmuffs back on, Professor Sprout ordered. Harry just shook his head, unable to believe that she honestly thought they were actually on topic. Fortunately, he'd done extensive research on mandrakes over the summer in preparation for this year's petrifactions. He didn't think he actually had anything to worry about until Halloween, though. After all, if an 11-year-old could resist Voldemort for 2 or 3 months, depending on when she'd started using the diary, Pettigrew certainly could. Hi, Harry, Colin Creevey chirped excitedly. He looked nervous, but determined. I'm Colin Creevey. I'm in Gryffindor, too. I know, Harry said quietly, remembering how pale Colin had looked in death, and how small. He had no business sneaking back into the castle to fight Voldemort. He was only 16. I saw you get sorted. You did. Now Colin was really red. Do you think? Would it be all right if, can I have a picture? He asked, raising his camera hopefully. All right, Harry agreed slowly. If it had been anyone else, or if Colin hadn't given his life long before his time, Harry would have refused and used the opportunity to banter with Draco and Lockhart, but it was strange. He'd thought it was endearing when Ginny had come back to fight despite being too young, but that's because he never thought she'd die. He'd never thought Colin would die, either. "Hermione, would you?" he asked, taking the camera from Colin and handing it to Hermione, figuring she was most likely to know how to operate. Standing next to Colin, Harry smiled as the flash went off. "I'm just saying it's weird," Ron said again as they headed towards defense. "And I'm just saying leave it," Harry retorted irritably. "But you hate it when people get all crazy and starstruck around you. So why would you dash?" Ron tried again. Harry whirled around. "Because he reminds me of a friend of mine who died, okay? Now just drop it." Ron paled, as he always did at the thought of death. Even at 12, he was still so sheltered. Harry took a deep breath and then headed to his seat. "I see you've all bought a complete set of my books." "Well done," Lockhart was saying. "I thought we'd start today with a little quiz." As Lockhart continued to drone, Hermione turned to Harry and glared. "I still can't believe that you didn't buy the books. How can you possibly pass this class if you don't get the textbooks?" Harry sighed dramatically. "First of all, they're not textbooks, they're storybooks. Secondly, I'm a celebrity. I come with a built-in BS ability. Third, Lockhart would never risk the wrath of his adoring public by flunking The Boy Who Lived and or Silenced, and finally, it's all about the final exams anyway." Hermione still didn't look happy, but Lockhart just placed a quiz down in front of her, so she was forced to let it go. "Let's see," Harry muttered, staring at his own quiz. 1. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite color? Famous, formerly, hot magenta. 2. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's secret ambition? To be able to take credit for every dangerous magical creature that's defeated anywhere in Europe. 3. What, in your opinion, is Gilderoy Lockhart's greatest achievement to date? The building and management of his adoring fanbase. And so on it went until finally Harry got to the last question. 54. When it is Gilderoy Lockhart's birthday, what would his ideal gift be? The recent defeat of a dangerous magical creature in a mysterious manner with no witnesses. He was pretty sure that his answers differed from what was in Lockhart's books. Not that he had ever read them, of course, but still they were bound to contain fewer references to his obliviating habit, but he still felt that they were appropriate and somewhat accurate. Glancing through the tests, Harry could tell when Lockhart got to his because he just stopped and stared at it for a few minutes before shaking his head and moving past it without a word. When Lockhart was done giving the class the answers and Harry and Ron were consequently done playing wizarding chess, Neville was done watching them, and Hermione was done lecturing them about the importance of paying attention while simultaneously taking notes like the girl genius she was, he moved on to the next part of the lesson. Cornish Pixies. Harry tuned out Lockhart's attempt to convince the class that Cornish Pixies were, in fact, highly dangerous creatures because he didn't think he could stop himself from saying something that would probably land him a detention. Normally, he wouldn't care, but there was no way in hell he was going to get stuck answering Lockhart's fan mail again. Right then, Lockhart declared grandly, throwing open the door to the pixie cage. "Let's see what you make of them." Harry watched impassively as the released pixies rushed around the room destroying everything. "Pescapixie Pesternemy," Lockhart bellowed after waiting until the class was suitably impressed. "And did absolutely nothing. Perhaps it was a joke spell? Like the one the twins had given Ron to change Scabbers' color? Have you tried Immobilis?" Harry suggested, pointing at one of the pixies, and while the class turned to watch the pixie fall, he discreetly pointed his wand at the other pixies and cast several silent freezing charms. How did you do that?" Seamus asked. Harry rolled his eyes. "With my incredible awesomeness. We've been over this, God." "Well done, Harry." Lockhart beamed as he brushed himself off and got out from behind his desk. 50 points to Gryffindor. Harry sat frozen in horror. "No matter what I do, there's no escaping it. Just kill me now." Chapter 13. That night at dinner, Harry found himself unable to eat. As a growing preteen boy, he found this to be quite worrisome. Fortunately, Harry also deduced that this was because of the nauseating celebration that was occurring at the Gryffindor table. Between Hermione's rapid-fire answers to Professor Sprout's herbology questions and his own punishment for not taking Lockhart's quiz seriously, they had already netted 90 points. Combined with the rest of the house, Gryffindor was up 112 points from that morning. Only Snape looked as sick as Harry felt. Deciding there was no reason he had to partake in these festivities, he stormed off to the Ravenclaw table in protest and plopped down in front of a surprised Luna Lovegood. "Hello, is anything the matter?" she asked curiously. "It's only the first day of school and Gryffindor already has an 80-point lead in the House Cup, and it's all my fault," Harry moaned. "I see. I've always thought that the desire to win that was indicative of the presence of Raxpert myself, but no one ever believes me," Luna confided. "That's because Dumbledore's got them too well indoctrinated," Harry explained. "He's making them think it's about house pride and proving that your house is better than the others, which is really quite detrimental to the concepts of school unity if you think about it." "Exactly," Luna beamed. "Thus, Raxperts, why are you sitting here?" "I had to get away from that." Harry gestured disgustedly over at the celebration. "Was that butterbeer he saw? But why here? I heard last year when the House Cup was awarded to Gryffindor at the last minute, you went over by the Slytherins." "Well, I'm kind of avoiding Draco," Harry admitted. "Seeing as how he had defense against the dark arts this morning and no doubt saw that, once again, that rumor about his mother and Snape that I accidentally started just won't die. And besides, why not sit here? I like you." "We only met yesterday," Luna pointed out. But what a meeting it was. I ordered that subscription of the Quibbler you recommended. I can't wait to hear about the things the Ministry is hiding from us, so I can be properly outraged. But let's talk about you. Are the other Ravenclaws treating you okay?" Luna nodded. "Oh yes. They seem to think that I'm under your protection or something because of last night, and I expect that after tonight they'll think that even more. They haven't even laughed at any of my theories once. I'm thinking of coming up with progressively more outlandish ones to see how long before they crack." "Now that is a noble goal," Harry laughed. "See, I knew there was a reason I liked you. We're both lone warriors in the fight against sheep mentalities." "I like sheep," Luna told him. "So do I, but when people like them so much they decide to think like them, they do all sorts of crazy things like declaring I'm the next Dark Lord," Harry countered. "It must be the Raxperts," Luna suggested. "Ah yes, the Raxperts wreaking havoc yet again and trying to blame it on the poor sheep," Harry shook his head sadly. "And that's going in next week's Quibbler." "Thanks, Harry." "Harry, a word, if I may," Lockhart said, intercepting Harry on his way to breakfast the next morning. Harry's friends looked concerned, but he just waved them off. He could handle himself. And if worse came to worse, he didn't want his friends to see him do some damage control. What with it not being ethical and him being of second year and all. "Yes, Professor?" Harry asked politely. "I wanted to talk to you about your quiz yesterday," Lockhart continued. "It wasn't anything from my books, of course, but still it was all quite amusing. Some of your answers did make me wonder, however. What exactly do you know about Dash? Your habit of tracking down well-meaning but publicity-shy individuals who rid their local populace of whatever form of magical creature ails them and obliviating them." Harry finished. Looking rather gobsmacked, Lockhart just nodded wordlessly. "Well, it's certainly not very nice. Still, if they had wanted the credit, they would have publicized their exploits better before you had time to hear of it and track them down," Harry replied. "There's nothing I could do to change the fact that you stole those people's memories and their accomplishments, and since Professor Dumbledore believes in unlimited second chances, he wouldn't do anything about it even if I told him. So, basically, as long as you don't try to obliviate me or one of my friends, I don't really plan on doing anything. Oh, and if you try to steal one of my accomplishments, I will beat you to death with a paper napkin." "Can you beat someone to death with a paper napkin?" Lockhart asked, intrigued and not at all bothered by Harry's threat. Harry shrugged. "I'll have fun trying. What's that funny clicking noise?" Fred asked in the middle of Quidditch practice that Saturday morning. "Oh, that's just Colin, my personal photographer," Harry explained. "Why do you need a personal photographer?" George asked, unsure if Harry was being serious or not. "Well, I figure that since Colin is clearly going to keep following me around and taking pictures of me, and since I'm really not that interesting Fred snorted at that, but Harry dutifully ignored him. I felt bad that he was wasting so much of his time, so I figured I might as well pay him. Besides, I set up a deal with the Daily Prophet, and anytime they do a story featuring me, they'll just contact Colin, and he can send them the appropriate photo. As the twins continued to stare at him, he elaborated, I got the idea from Lockhart. Man's a media genius. I suppose he'd almost have to be good at something, George mused. And it's certainly not teaching, Fred contributed. What's going on? Wood frowned as he flew by to see why his seeker and beaters had suddenly stopped practicing. Is that first year spying on us? Oh, no, that's just Harry's photographer, Fred said cheerfully. So, I guess that would probably put him in Gryffindor. Besides, the Slytherin team apparently couldn't find anybody to spy as they showed up in person. And full Quidditch gear, George remarked. Why in the world are they wearing their Quidditch robes to practice in? Harry asked, confused. That has got to be the stupidest thing I've seen all day. All day isn't very long, Harry, Fred pointed out as they went down to meet the rival team. It can't be more than 10, and we were listening to Oliver ramble about how he wants us to win the cup again this year, and next year. Seeing Harry tense up, he quickly clarified, the Quidditch Cup, Harry, the Quidditch Cup. He couldn't care less about the House Cup. Oh, that's all right then, Harry said, calming down. And yesterday afternoon Parvati and Lavender called me in to help them figure out who in our year is most skin tone compatible with them. I swear, one of these days I'm going to just spy Witch Weekly and force them to stop printing such inane articles that force poor innocent schoolchildren to undergo 2 hours of that sort of torture. You do that, Harry.
Flint.
Wood yelled. This is our practice time. We got up specifically. You can clear off now. Plenty of room for all of us, Wood, Flint said innocently. But I booked the pitch. Wood protested, his face turning a most interesting shade of purple that Harry was quite certain wasn't a good thing. I booked it. Ah, Flint said brightly. I see why there might be some confusion then. You booked the pitch, and I got a note signed by Professor Snape saying, I, Professor S. Snape, give the Slytherin team permission to practice today on the Quidditch pitch, owing to the need to adjust to their new brooms. Wouldn't it have been easier to just book the pitch like a normal person? Harry asked reasonably. Flint flushed. Well, I would have, except this week has been kind of hectic with Newt Review and everything, and so it just slipped my mind, so I asked Professor Snape at the end of potions yesterday. You've got new brooms? Wood asked, distracted. What kind? Our seeker, Draco Malfoy, was concerned that the team wasn't living up to its full potential, and so his father bought the Team Nimbus 2001s, Flint said proudly. Oh, that's good. Harry sighed, relieved. Everyone looked at him like he was crazy. He didn't care, though. That had been happening quite frequently since he had come back. Good? Good? You think it's good that the Slytherin team now possesses 7 of the fastest brooms out there? Wood asked disbelievingly. Well, yes, Harry replied. Otherwise it was going to be really awkward when Professor Dumbledore announced that I had bought the Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff Team 7 Nimbus 2001s each. More staring. Really, he might as well be talking to himself for how much input everyone else was giving him. And now Ron, Hermione, and Neville were coming over to see what the fuss was about. Would they have any more to say than his teammates? Doubtful. Why didn't you buy the Slytherin team any brooms? Draco asked, suddenly offended. I mean, you had no way of knowing that I was going to do it. Oh, yes, he did. And that was why he'd bothered to go even the playing field, because he didn't want to listen to everyone complaining about favoritism when he knew they'd have all bought themselves top-of-the-line brooms if they could afford them. Well, Harry said, thinking quickly. I didn't feel that last year's games against Cedric and Cho were much of a test of my ability, because on my broom could outfly their brooms any day of the week. In order to have more of a challenge, I decided to get them faster brooms. Knowing that the rest of their team would give them a hard time about accepting a gift from a rival seeker and there would be talk of them throwing matches, I bought the rest of them brooms, too. And I couldn't possibly put Gryffindor at such a disadvantage by giving 2/3 of our competition state-of-the-art brooms and not giving ourselves anything, so I had to buy Gryffindor brooms as well. Since you already had a Nimbus 2000 from last year, It didn't even occur to me to get the rest of your team anything, and so that was why it was really awkward when I realized sometime last week that my donation would seem like discrimination. Not bad for an on-the-spot cover-up. But now our advantage is gone, Draco hissed at him. Think of it this way. If you hadn't bought the team brooms, you would get flattened in every match, Harry reassured him. You saved Slytherin from a year of horribly humiliating slaughters. Draco brightened considerably at this, and Harry could only imagine how long he was going to use his newfound savior of Quidditch status. Since the Slytherins really do need to break in their new brooms and our team's brooms are going to be presented at dinner row night, I recommend that we just let them have the bloody pitch so I can go back to bed, Harry suggested. It's 10 o'clock, Harry, Hermione said, raising her eyebrows. I know, but I only got 2 hours of sleep last night. Now, everyone turned to stare at Wood.
What?
I didn't wake them up until 5, he defended. The twins, Lee, Alicia, Katie, Angelina, and I were having a poker tournament last night that didn't end until 3, Harry explained. In order to build team solidarity, you understand. We would have asked you to join us, Wood, but we expected it to run late, and you had announced at dinner that you were going to bed early. He paused. Probably because you knew that we had a ridiculously early practice this morning and couldn't be bothered to tell us. Anyway, who here thinks going back to bed sounds like a great idea? 6 hands flew in the air. I rest my case, Harry told Wood, the only one with his hand still at his side. Next time we have a practice before 9, please tell us. After all, while you have a point about the weather being unpredictable during games, we will actually know what time the game is at least a week in advance, so I don't see why you can't just make an announcement the night before. With that, he turned and started heading back to the castle. Hey, mate, Ron called as he, Hermione, and Neville hurried after him. Yeah? Harry asked, not turning around. Why are you avoiding my sisters? Harry froze. Avoiding Ginny? I'm not, Dash. Ron rolled his eyes. Yes, you are. Every time she comes near you, you find some reason to immediately leave. Last week you even went over to sit with the Ravenclaws when she sat down across from you. Harry trailed off. He hadn't realized that he'd been avoiding Ginny, but thinking back, he supposed that that was exactly what he was doing. Who could blame him, though? If he hadn't gone back, little James or Lily would be celebrating their first birthday soon. Now, they might never exist. On the bright side, since the baby had not actually been born, assuming that he and Ginny got around to having children again, he wouldn't be able to miss their child as a person, just as a what might have been, and he wouldn't be subconsciously comparing his old child with his new one and hating himself all the while. And then there was Ginny herself. She didn't have the diary this time around. Thank God for that, or he'd have to add that to the list of things he would never forgive himself for. Beginning with abandoning Ginny and their unborn child to go through the veil. So, he wasn't sure just how to break her off her hero-worshipping and get her to see him as a normal person, particularly as he was apparently avoiding her. But it was more than just annoyance. He was dealing with Lockhart, after all, and the man's habit of mentioning how great he was approximately once every other sentence did grate on his nerves. It was uncertainty and guilt. He fell in love with the Ginny that had held off full possession by Voldemort's Horcrux for almost a year at the age of 11, who had, despite their almost complete lack of contact, believed him without question when he insisted Voldemort was back at the age of 13, who had gone with him on his suicidal plan to save Sirius when she was 14, who had battled full-fledged Death Eaters when they invaded Hogwarts at 15, and who had co-led the Hogwarts resistance when it had fallen under Death Eater control and stayed for the final battle against all of Riddle's forces when she was 16. That was the girl he had fallen in love with. And while he would never want her to go through all of that again, he had, in fact, inadvertently already stopped the first. They all played a part in making Ginny who she was when he finally realized that she existed. While she was still the same person, he was worried that he'd end up trying to use this Ginny to replace the other Ginny that he lost, and that wasn't fair to either of them. So maybe he was avoiding her. But he had some damn good reasons. Harry could see that Ron was still waiting for an answer, and as he could never even hope to make the 12-year-old understand, he found himself latching onto one of his reasons for staying away from her last time. Though, to be fair, she was a lot better at controlling her inner fangirl than she had been the first time. I'm a little uncomfortable that your sister seems to see me as some sort of hero. I'm not really. I'm just a guy in some pretty extraordinary circumstances, that's all. You don't mind Colin following you around, Neville pointed out. And he acts far more enthralled with you than Ginny. But Colin doesn't have a crush on me, Harry countered, crossing his arms. I'm not too sure about that. Ron muttered. Be nice, Hermione admonished, swatting at Ron. Personally, I think you're being very nice to Colin, and I'm proud of you for that. Still, you're going to have to deal with a lot of girls having crushes on you, especially when we get older. Not only are you the boy who lived, but you also attract a fair amount of attention through all of your various accomplishments and missions. I know. Harry held up his hands in surrender, too tired to continue the argument. But I don't have to deal with any of them on a regular basis, and since Ginny is Ron's sister, I do have to deal with her. But...
He sighed.
I'll try to stop avoiding Ginny. Happy now? 3 identical grins assured him that they were. Chapter 14. The rest of September passed remarkably quickly for Harry, who woke up every morning half expecting to hear news of an attack in the night. Hopefully petrifaction, but you never knew. Just because the possessed Ginny never managed to kill anyone didn't mean that the possessed Wormtail wouldn't. As October progressed, it looked like the first attack could very well be on Halloween again. Perhaps it wasn't a coincidence that Mrs. Norris was petrified on Halloween the first time. It was thematic. One day, about a week before Halloween, Harry was held up after breakfast by a rather concerned Percy Weasley. Not that he minded, of course. Hermione had been yelling at him ever since the owl post arrived for ordering notebook paper and actual pens. Apparently, she expected him to humor the people who couldn't be bothered to use paper from a tree to write on when they could just use the skin of calves, sheep, or goats instead, and who insisted on writing with bloody feathers. Seriously, between their office supplies and their classes, Harry was beginning to think that the entire wizarding world just really hated animals. Or maybe Hermione was mad that he intended to sell some of his stock to Muggleborns and half-bloods who also preferred to live in the 20th century and not the Middle Ages. He might have also mentioned something about starting up a Hogwarts chapter of PETA. But honestly, the girl was totally overreacting. He thought she'd be pleased he was getting involved in his community given her later activities with Spew, but knew. And then there was that letter she got from her parents saying that half of her neighborhood was apparently planning on dressing up in official Harry Potter costumes that he forgot to mention he authorized. Or maybe it was because he... Harry, have you seen this? Percy demanded, holding up that day's issue of the Daily Prophet and effectively bringing an end to Harry's musings on why Hermione was upset with him. Nope, Harry said cheerfully. I only read the Quibbler. I recently signed up to be their spokesperson, after all. I see, Percy said, rather taken aback. He quickly rallied, though. There is an article in here about how you donated brooms to 3 of the houses, and the Malfoys donated to the last house.
Harry asked.
Percy nodded. Made the front page. Another nod. About damn time. I insisted that it be on the front page, but I didn't think it would take this long. They must have actually had some real news to report for once. Tell me the truth. Did the story do me justice? Harry asked, looking curiously at Percy. I guess so, Percy replied. But that's not what I wanted to talk to you about. They included the price of each broom, and I did the math, and you spent way too much money on this. I know your parents were wealthy, Harry. You only have to provide for yourself, and you'll have free lodging until you graduate, but it's still not a good idea to burn through all of your money by then. Relax, Percy, Harry told him patronizingly. I've got that all taken care of. Befriend a leprechaun colony? Harry laughed. No. Sadly, leprechaun gold dies after a few hours. Dies. Percy arched an eyebrow at him. Well, the official story is missing, Harry admitted. But we all know what that means. And like I said, I've got my finances taken care of. That Daily Prophet story? Quality photos of the boy who lived apparently go for 50 galleons right now. Colin Creevey takes the pictures, so he gets most of it, but I still get 20%. I get a percentage of the sales for the Quibbler, and let me tell you, subscription has really taken off, so it's a good thing I decided to get involved when I did. Also, I've authorized Harry Potter action figures and plushies, trademarked my name, and am currently working on developing my own clothing line. It's nothing fancy, just robes with a lightning bolt on it, but it's receiving positive feedback so far. Not to mention how much I've been getting through autographed picture sales and fan club dues. Percy just stared at him. Are you alright? Harry asked after a full 5 minutes of Percy just standing there. Yes, I'm fine, Percy said finally, shaking his head. May I ask why you're doing this? So I have money to burn, Harry said simply. Besides, if people are willing to buy anything that has my name attached to it, I might as well merchandise, right? Or at least that's what Professor Lockhart said. I'm starting to think that you spend way too much time with that man, Percy said bluntly. Maybe you're right, Harry said sadly, his shoulders hunched. I just got so excited thinking of all the ways I could help people. I guess I'll have to tell Madame Pants that I won't be making that 5,000 galleon donation after all. On the other hand, Percy said hastily, as long as you frequently consult a seasoned professional like Professor Lockhart, I'm sure your money will be fine. Harry smirked as he watched the older boy hurry away. This is bloody ridiculous, Harry complained as he followed Luna, Lockhart, Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Filch up to Lockhart's office. Luna just smiled serenely, no doubt composing an article on the events in her head. All Harry had wanted to do was enjoy the Halloween feast with his friends like not like a normal person, it was a bit late for that, but like the other students. But no, he wasn't a normal person. He was on the Quidditch team. He had tracked mud all over the Great Hall when he was coming back from practice, got yelled at by Filch for making more work for him, vanished the mud, got yelled at by Filch again for showing off, and had gotten cornered by nearly headless Nick and invited to his death stay party. Harry, who had had a miserable time at Nick's little ghost gathering, was about to decline when Luna came out of nowhere and asked if she could come, too. Nick had, of course, agreed, and so Harry was morally obligated to go to prevent Luna from deciding that she'd rather be a ghost than a girl or something else that could get her killed. Then, right when Harry had finally managed to convince Luna to at least head down to the feast for a little bit, she heard the basilisk in the walls. Luna wasn't a Parselmouth by any means, but apparently had bad ears because she claimed that she heard hissing coming from the walls and insisted on checking it out. Unable to talk her out of it, Harry followed, and came across Mrs. Norris, petrified again, right before the other students passed by on their return to their common rooms. Consequentially, Filch had accused the two of them of killing his cat, and they were on their way to defend themselves. Harry was so busy oscillating between feeling sorry for himself and feeling annoyed that despite his best intentions, he was at the heart of the Chamber of Secrets investigation again. He didn't pay any attention to the proceedings until Dumbledore informed Filch that his cat wasn't dead. Not dead, choked Filch. But why's she all stiff and frozen? Because she's been petrified, Harry explained before Dumbledore could. Is that a confession? Filch demanded angrily. Of course not, Harry said, offended. I just recognized the symptoms, and since when were you such an expert on petrifaction? Snape sneered. Since about halfway through the summer, when my scar told me that the Chamber of Secrets would be opened by an unregistered Ratonymus who is believed to be dead, who is being possessed by an evil diary, and that in the Chamber of Secrets there is a basilisk, and looking at the basilisk would petrify a bunch of students. And Mrs. Norris, Harry added as an afterthought. Basilisks don't petrify people, Snape corrected him gleefully. They kill people. Everyone knows that. Your scar clearly hasn't put much thought into this. Au contraire, it's put quite a bit. While it agrees that staring directly into a basilisk's big, yellow eyes will kill you, Mrs. Norris only saw the reflection after moaning myrtle flooded the bathroom, Harry said, smiling brightly at him. Snape pounced on that, of course. How would you know what basilisk eyes look like? No one has ever seen them, and lived to tell the tale. I'm not quite sure how the fact that I'm alive implicates me in Mrs. Norris's attack, but I know because I asked Myrtle. And how would Myrtle know? McGonagall asked before Snape could say something that everyone else would regret. She was killed when the Chamber of Secrets was opened 50 years ago. Luna spoke up for the first time. We were interviewing all of the ghosts at Sir Nicholas's party, and they were all so very eager to tell us how they died. I think it's a bit like old people and their grandchildren, really. You weren't at the feast because you were attending a party for ghosts? Snape asked incredulously. They don't serve anything that hasn't been rotten for at least 2 weeks. That's why we stole some sandwiches from the kitchen, Harry replied. Snape actually grinned. 20 points from Gryffindor for going to the kitchens, stealing Hogwarts food, and bothering the house elves. He doesn't bother them, Luna disagreed. They like him. In fact, they adopted him last week. Adopted? Lockhart asked blankly, the other teachers sharing his confusion for once.
Oh yes.
They've decided that he's an honorary house elf based on his stories of how his relatives treat him, and I must say, I am very jealous. She paused, considering. Well, about the becoming an honorary house elf, not the getting treated like one by my only family in the world. I see, McGonagall said, trying to regain her equilibrium. Miss Lovegood, since you went to the kitchens as well, Oh, it was all my fault, Professor, Harry said earnestly, hoping to keep her out of trouble with her housemates who she reported still thought she was odd but weren't harassing her this time around. I talked her into it. I'm a horrible influence. I knew it, Snape exclaimed. That's 10 more points from Gryffindor, Potter. Severus, McGonagall protested. That's hardly Oh, it's very fair, Professor. Harry defended his sole ally among the staff. Well, in his point-losing crusade, anyway. I really should know better. Luna's only a first year. And you're only a second, McGonagall pointed out. There is no such thing as a good influence, Mr. Potter, Luna assured him. All influence is immoral because to influence a person is to give him one's own soul. The picture of Dorian Gray. Harry exclaimed delightedly. This is why you're my 4th closest friend. I quote things all the time, but no one ever recognizes it except Hermione, and she always chides me for being childish. Rack spurts, Luna diagnosed. They're a pandemic, Harry agreed. Potter, Snape shouted. When Harry finally deigned to look at him, he continued, enough about your mythological creatures and your obscure Muggle literature. Tell me why you weren't at the feast. Harry stared at Snape. We already did, Professor. We went to Nick's Death Day party. We have a ton of witnesses. Of course, they're all dead, but you would be a livingist, would you? Despite the fact that Snape almost certainly knew it was a bad idea, he had to ask, livingist? Someone who judges someone based on whether they are alive or dead, Luna answered promptly. The Quibbler has been trying to bring people's attentions to these little-known prejudices, but clearly you don't subscribe, Harry elaborated. Snape's lip curled. Indeed. And why didn't you go to the feast after the parties? Oh, the party's still going on. We were actually headed to the feast when we happened across Mrs. Norris, Harry said. And why didn't you come down until after the feast ended? Snape thought he had them there, but the pair actually had a very simple reason for that, and it didn't even involve any illicit activities. There were a lot of ghosts, Luna explained. Sir Nicholas invited one for every year he'd been dead, and we wanted to interview all of them. If you were on your way to join the feast, then why were you in that upstairs corridor? Snape asked logically. Why were the students returning from the feast up there if that corridor is nowhere near the Great Hall? Harry shot back. We were up there because I heard the walls hissing, and I wanted to investigate, Luna said tranquilly. Harry groaned. He'd actually understood what the basilisk was saying, but wasn't planning on bringing the fact that they had heard anything up. As Ron had pointed out after the original accusation, it was better to keep the fact that he could hear the basilisk quiet. Although, come to think of it, Ron was actually talking about Harry hearing voices and probably thought he was crazy. Ah well, it was the thought that counted. Dumbledore looked startled. You're a parselmouth, Miss Lovegood? Oh no, Luna shook her head. I didn't understand what the wall was saying. I just heard hissing. That totally lends credence to my Scar's basilisk theory. Just so you know, Harry couldn't resist adding. Doesn't anyone care about my cat? Complained Filch. Biting his tongue to refrain from answering in the negative, Harry reached into his pocket and pulled out a vial of mandrake potion and held it out for Filch to take. What's this? He asked suspiciously as he took the vial. Some kind of poison? No, Harry assured him. I wouldn't do that. Not in front of all these witnesses. At any rate. Somehow, That did not seem to calm Filch. Strange. It's Mandrake Potion. It can revive Mrs. Norris. And you just happen to be carrying this around with you? Snape demanded. Headmaster. Clearly Potter knows more than he's letting on. Of course I don't just happen to carry some around. But I have had 3 vials on me since the moment I stepped foot in Hogwarts this year. And I confessed that I knew that at some point a basilisk was going to be set loose on the school, and you think I'm hiding something? Really? Harry asked. Harry makes some good points. Lockhart was quick to side with his marketing prodigy. And since he's clearly not responsible for this, no permanent harm was done, and Mrs. Norris will be immediately revived. Why don't we let these two get back to their common rooms? An excellent idea, Dumbledore began. He knows I'm a squibs. Filch burst out, interrupting the headmaster. Everyone looked at Harry. Well, okay, that one's true, but considering that I already mentioned that I'm against discriminating against people who happen to be dead, it's highly unlikely that I have a problem with people who happen to not have magic, Harry said reasonably. That's an admirable attitude, Dumbledore said, pleased once again by Harry's blatant refusal to accept the ingrained prejudices of wizarding society. Very well, off to bed, you two. Do you want to just get dinner in the kitchen since the feast is over? Harry asked as he and Luna left Lockhart's office. That sounds like a good plan, Luna agreed. And I want to see the house elves working on those chocolate pumpkins. Why are you having actual pumpkin-sized chocolate replicas delivered to everyone in the castle in the middle of the night tonight? Because this summer when I was talking about the Great Pumpkin, Cedric told me that he didn't believe in it, and we made a bet about whether or not I would be able to prove its existence to him, Harry explained. That sounds an awful lot like fraud, Harry, Luna told him. It's not fraud. We're just the Great Pumpkin's helpers, Harry contradicted. Just like Santa has the elves. And now the Great Pumpkin has the house elves, Luna mused. And me, the honorary elf, Harry said smugly. Luna glared playfully at him. Isn't the Great Pumpkin from Peanuts? Do you honestly think Cedric has ever heard of Charlie Brown? I suppose not, Luna conceded. A good thing, too, because I heard that the only way to really summon the Great Pumpkin is through a satanic ritual. Harry stopped and looked at her. Luna, he said slowly. What have I told you about fact-checking? Never ever do it unless your godfather has been thrown into Azkaban without a trial, Luna guessed. Exactly. After Harry walked Luna to her common room, and thanked God once again that he wasn't a Ravenclaw as he never could figure out the riddle, and that would make him the third-year Neville of Ravenclaw, he headed immediately for the Ollery. He knew he shouldn't risk getting caught out tonight of all nights, and he hadn't thought to take his invisibility cloak with him to the party. A mistake, to be sure. But this was important. He had to talk to Sirius now that Pettigrew was on the move, and he needed to do it soon. He quickly scrawled out, "We need to talk. PP has made his appearance. Name the time and place." Hedwig, he whispered, and after a moment, his large snowy owl flew to him. "Give this to Sirius, okay? Make sure he's alone, and don't leave without a response." As Harry watched Hedwig fly off, he realized that things were about to get complicated. Oh joy. Chapter 15. The following morning, everyone was pleased but mystified as to why giant chocolate pumpkins with a cursory note from the Great Pumpkin wishing them a happy Halloween. As Harry went down to breakfast, Cedric called out to him. "I still don't believe you," the older boy said matter-of-factly. "Both about the Great Pumpkin and about the lengths you'd go to convince me." "You just don't want to pay up," Harry argued. "And how else do you explain that delightful and thoughtful Halloween gift?" "I'm sure I don't know," Cedric said. "But you're probably behind it. I don't know how you did it, but it was definitely you." "God, you're starting to sound like Snape," Harry muttered. "And what makes you think that I'm worthy to be the Great Pumpkin's assistant anyway?" "I don't think you're worthy to be the Great Pumpkin's assistant because the Great Pumpkin is not real," Cedric said slowly. Harry looked pained. "See if the Great Pumpkin comes to visit you next year. I bet next you'll say that you don't believe in Santa Claus." Cedric's brow furrowed.
"But I don't dash."
Silence. Harry held up his hand. "I will not hear your lies. Good day." With that he walked over to the Gryffindor table and, after a moment's debate, sat down across from Ginny. He did promise he'd try, after all. He just wished she'd hurry up and get over him so he could pursue her. as convoluted as that sounded. "Hey, Ginny," Harry greeted her. "Like your pumpkin?" Ginny, who had begun to blush the minute he sat down, brightened.
Uh-huh.
"I'm not entirely sure that I believe in this great pumpkin, but if he's willing to give me massive amounts of chocolate, I guess I can play along." "That's the spirit," Harry beamed. "But don't ask Luna about it." Ginny cocked her head at him curiously, and Harry remembered that since the two lived so close together, they were already more or less friends. Why not? If the teachers heard some of her theories on the great pumpkin, they might bend any visits in future years, Harry confided. Ginny said, as if that explained everything. When it came to Luna, it usually did. "I can't find it," Hermione complained as she slid in next to Ginny. Ron and Neville each took a place on one side of Harry. "Can't find what?" Harry asked, genuinely confused. "Both copies of Hogwarts, a history, have been checked out."
"I see."
"May I ask why in the world that book is so popular when I know for a fact that the last person before you to check it out was my mother's?" Harry asked. "Everyone wants information about the Chamber of Secrets," Neville told him. The pumpkins were a nice distraction to stop everyone from panicking, but there was still a mad library rush. "This morning," and Hermione made us come along with her to look for a copy. "When she found out that both copies were gone, she made us look around the library like she thought Madame Pants was lying to her and was secretly stashing extra copies under the tables and in the restricted section. Boy was searching there without Madame Pants noticing fun," Ron added, shuddering. "But Hermione, don't you remember that last year I got you a copy of that exact book? Why ever do you need to check one out from the libraries?" Harry inquired. He vaguely remembered getting her that book the year before, and, though he wasn't particularly interested in her answer, he didn't put it past some of the people who were far too interested in his life, not that he minded this time around, to drive themselves crazy wondering about it. "With all those Lockhart books we needed, there wasn't room in my trunk for it," Hermione explained. "So I had to leave it at home." "You wasted all that space with Lockhart books, but you couldn't bring Hogwarts, a history?" Ron asked, rolling his eyes. "No, you definitely don't have a crush on him." Hermione didn't blush like Ron clearly expected her to. "Wasted? Ron, those Lockhart books are our textbooks. Of course I brought them. It would make no sense to leave any of my textbooks at home, so I could bring a personal reading book, particularly when the library has 2 copies and usually nobody uses them. Although this doesn't explain why you didn't carry it on with you, or have it old to you," Neville pointed it out. "My parents aren't comfortable with owls," Hermione explained. "And I suppose it just didn't occur to me to carry it on. I can't be expected to think of everything." "Why didn't you wake me?" Harry asked, a little annoyed that he missed an excellent opportunity to cause chaos. Now that she mentioned it, he did distantly remember Hermione not having a copy of the book in the original timeline for those exact same reasons. "We tried," Neville assured him. "You started hexing us." "I don't remember this," Harry said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "That's because you were still asleep," Ron said. "Oh, honestly," Hermione scoffed. "It's not like he sleeps with his wand under his pillow." Ginny giggled at the look on Harry's face. "Well, actually, I kind of do," he corrected her. "Sorry I sleep hexed you guys, but I'm glad I wasn't too sleep annoyed, or else you would probably still be in the hospital wing." "Yeah, that's great, Harry," Hermione said distractedly, and with absolutely no sympathy for the suddenly wary-looking Ron and Neville. "But in the meantime, how am I supposed to learn about what happened to Mrs. Norris and the Chamber of Secrets?" Harry snapped his fingers. "Oh, that's right, I almost forgot." Harry stood up on top of his seat and cast a quick sonorous. "Attention everyone," he boomed. The students all looked at him in interest, and several teachers looked mildly annoyed. No one tried to stop him, though, which was always good. Dumbledore wasn't in the Great Hall to try and censor him for the students' own good, which was better. "It has come to my attention that no one except my best non-quartet friend," Harry did his best to stop from flinching at the words quartet, which he still had a strange aversion to, "Luna Lovegood, and I know what actually happened last night. This isn't because I'm famous and she's awesome, although we certainly are that. It's because we're reporters and reporters always know everything before anyone else does. After all, if we didn't, we'd be kind of unemployed. But anyway, Last night, a supposedly dead parent betrayer, illegal ratonymagus, whose name my scar is not clear on but is fairly certain rhymes with Peter Pettigrew, broke into the castle in illegal ratonymagus form and opened the Chamber of Secrets. Why would he do that? Percy asked, skeptical. Because he was possessed by an evil diary that used to belong to Tom Riddle. That's right, you heard me. Lord Bloody, I'm so scary no one can bear to say my name, Voldemort. Harry paused to wait for the gasps to die down, kept a diary. Granted, he enchanted it to cause anyone else who writes in it to open up the Chamber of Secrets and attack people, but it's still a diary. And for that matter, who writes in another person's diary? That's just kind of bizarre, and definitely in bad taste. Are you saying you know what's in the Chamber of Secrets? Justin Finch-Fletchley, who Harry was slightly peeved at for shunning him when Harry was over at the Hufflepuff table to talk to Cedric, asked, fear obvious in his voice. Yes, Harry said simply. Is that because you're responsible for Ernie Macmillan began. Harry, in the interest of quelling the soon-to-be rampant, especially after what he had planned for the Dueling Club, rumors about him being the heir of Slytherin and not letting the rather pompous Ernie steal his precious spotlight, quickly cut him off. No, it is not. Trust me, if I were responsible for this, I wouldn't be hiding my ability, and I certainly wouldn't be petrifying people for free. Instead, I would market it. It was almost sad how convinced everyone looked at that. They wouldn't necessarily believe he would never petrify anybody, but they would believe he was that obsessed with money. He wasn't really, it was all just a game. A test to see just how far he could use his fame before there was a backlash. There is a basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets. You can get the full story about the chamber in Hogwarts, a history, but unfortunately there is apparently a huge waiting list for the schools. To those of you who don't know, a basilisk is a giant snake. The one in our school is approximately 60 feet long, that has very poisonous fangs and will kill you if you make eye contact. If you look at its reflection, you will only be petrified. Fortunately, I have a supply of mirrors, books, and mandrake potion, which will unpetrify you on hand. The mandrake potion is free, but the mirrors are 10 sickles each, and the books are 5 galleons. For an extra 5 sickles, I can sign your book. That will be available after breakfast. And how do you know all of this? Justin repeated. My scar told me, Harry said. That's all you really need to know. I don't think scars work like that, Penelope Clearwater said, frowning. Who's the one with a one-of-a-kind killing curse scar, you or me? Harry asked her rhetorically. When she didn't answer, he continued. I think that makes me the expert. Now, Filch's cat has already been unpetrified, and while that may annoy some of you, know that this is also proof that the mandrake potion is both effective and quick, so even though the fact that the basilisk is moving through the pipes means it can appear anywhere at any time, as long as you always use a mirror to look around a corner, you should be fine. Now, who wants to buy something? Harry was immediately mobbed. Harry, are you sure this is entirely ethical? Hermione asked him later that day as they were heading over to look at the place where Mrs. Norris was petrified. Apparently someone had turned the blood-red lettering of Riddle's message neon pink, using people's panic to make a profit and withholding potentially life-saving tools in times of crisis. Relax, Hermione, Harry told her. No one really needs Hogwarts, a history, and now that so many people are buying it, the waiting list in the library should be much more reasonable for those that can't afford it. The mirror is essential, but lots of people possess handheld mirrors. And just bought one from me because they are trademark Harry Potter mirrors, and for those that don't have a mirror and need one, I consulted some of the less well-off students, and 10 sickles is a very reasonable price. As for profiting off of everyone's panic, well, guilty as charged. But you heard Neville. I also stopped people from panicking with my pumpkins. That was you? Ron asked, wide-eyed. Of course it was, Hermione said, rolling her eyes. What did you think? There actually was a great pumpkin out there you've never heard of until today. Maybes? Hey, isn't this where all the water came from last night?
Harry asked.
Let's go see where it came from. All right, Hermione agreed and headed in. Ron didn't move. I can't go in there. Why not? Neville asked. That's a girl's bathroom, Ron said gruffly. Oh, grow up, Harry advised. In a couple more years, you'll be begging for a reason to come in here. Besides, there are just stalls and girls' bathrooms, so it's not like you'd even see anything anyway. Looking incredibly reluctant, Ron allowed Neville and Harry to pull him into the bathroom, where, to their surprise, they found Luna trying to talk Hermione into getting a subscription to the Quibbler. She didn't appear to be making much progress. "I wouldn't bother with her just yet, Luna," Harry told her. "She's just not ready." Immediately, Luna's expression became much more somber. "I am so sorry," she said sincerely.
"What do you mean you're sorry?"
"For what? And what am I not ready for?" Hermione demanded, looking a bit affronted. "You're not ready for the Quibbler," Harry said. Hermione, who looked as if she were of the opinion that it was the Quibbler that was not ready for her, narrowed her eyes. "Why not?" "Because you didn't even consider the possibility that the Great Pumpkin is real," Luna said matter-of-factly. Hermione did a double take. "How do you even know that?" "You were debating its existence with Neville when you were in the library this morning," Luna explained. "What were you doing in the libraries?" Hermione asked, uncertain she wanted to know. "Checking out 2 copies of Hogwarts, a history," Luna replied brightly. Harry laughed. "I love you, Luna, I really do." Hermione could only gape wordlessly and with not a little outrage at the blonde Ravenclaw. She had spent 3 hours looking for a copy after all. Seeing this, Neville quickly stepped in. "So, why does that disqualify Hermione from being Quibbler material?" Luna gave him an amused look. "If you can't even entertain that notion, then you will not be able to handle some of our more interesting news." "What are you even doing here, Luna?" Harry asked conversationally. "I was doing a follow-up interview with Myrtle here," Luna said, gesturing towards the ghost who had until that point been hiding in one of the toilets. Seeing as how she left so abruptly last night after Peeves started teasing her. "You really shouldn't let him get to you like that," Harry added. "He's just bitter that the ghosts won't accept him because he's not technically dead, and he has no purpose but to cause as much havoc as possible. Now, while Fred, George, and I may think that that is a noble mission, I'm sure being completely isolated at all times since the beginning of your existence must get a little frustrating at times, and so he took it out on you. He can't really do anything about the isolation either, because just imagine what would happen if there were to be 2 poltergeists at Hogwarts." Everyone took a moment to contemplate that and quickly realized that Harry was right, and that must never, ever be allowed to happen. "I know," Myrtle admitted, "but sometimes he just gets to be too much. I mean, I was killed right at the height of puberty, so not only am I eternally bespectacled and acne-ridden, but I'm hormonal as hell and liable to cry at the drop of a hat." "I am so sorry," Harry told her honestly. "Not to mention, I was on my period at the time." Harry could only wince. He'd had plenty of secondhand experience with PMS.
"Wow.
That sucks. I'm sorry." Myrtle nodded. "Thank you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'm about to cry for no reason I can think of, so I'd like to be alone now." "Bye," Luna said, waving. "Thanks for the interview, Ron," Percy Weasley shouted the minute they emerged from the bathroom. "That's a girl's bathroom. What were you, Dash?" "Ron's considering a sex change," Harry said seriously. "He's still undecided, so we're showing him all the differences there will be if he ever goes through with it, and going to the girls' bathroom instead of the boys' will definitely be one of them." Percy opened and closed his mouth a few times, but no sound came out. "You prat," Ron swatted at Harry. "I am not." "Thank God," Percy said, relieved. "I don't even want to think about how I would explain how you became Ronnie to Mother." "Percy, I'm disappointed in you," Harry said, crossing his arms. "This will be good," Percy said with the air of someone who knew that Harry literally had no room to judge anybody for anything short of stupidity or being a Death Eater. "For being glad that something that isn't happening. It just seems a little transphobic to be glad that your sibling isn't trans," Harry explained.
"But he's not," Percy said.
"But what if he was?" Harry pressed. "In fact, what if he is but doesn't feel comfortable telling you? Or someone else you know or care about? Or one of the students you are supposed to be serving as a support system for as a prefect? And now is not the time, but I'm wondering about if people can use magic to change their body to match how they feel it should be. Making a mental note to look into this later." That is a good point, and I will definitely have to take that into consideration in the future, Percy said slowly. But you're the one who made the sex change joke in the first place. Harry froze. Can I leave? Ron asked hopefully. I feel like I don't need to be here for any of this. And like Hermione probably should be. Percy and Harry ignored him. You're right, Harry whispered, looking aghast. Did I just say something transphobic? I didn't mean to, but that doesn't mean I didn't. It's okay, Harry, Percy assured him. No one is a perfect ally, and all you can do is learn from your mistakes. An ally against what? Ron asked, looking annoyed. What are we even talking about? Transphobia, Harry replied. Weren't you listening? Ron rolled his eyes. Whatever, I'll ask Hermione later. And not do the recommended reading she inevitably gives me. You know, being honest about why we were there, or just ignoring Percy, and leaving probably would have taken less time.
I assure you it would not, Percy said.
But as you just reminded me, being a prefect means I'm still obligated to ask what you were doing in there. But we just had a moment. Harry protested. The rules don't care if moments were had, Percy said unsympathetically. Harry began, but Ron shot him a glare. I'll handle this if you don't mind. Ron took a deep breath. We want to go stare at the pink writing, and then Harry decided to go investigate why the girls' bathroom flooded, and when I said that I couldn't go in there, he assured me that once puberty hit, I'd be singing a different tune, and when we got in there, Harry's friend Luna was moaning Myrtle. Myrtle got depressed, and we left.
Percy blinked.
No, really, why were you in there? That's what happened, Ron insisted. I swear I must be getting old, Percy muttered. Do you have any idea how this looks? Coming back here when everyone else is down at dinner. So nobody will see us up here, Harry shrugged. Besides, everyone's been coming up to stare at the wall all day. There's really not much to do around here. Hogwarts is surprisingly dull as far as magical schools go. It is not, Hermione and Percy exclaimed, scandalized, simultaneously. You know, at Durmstrang the Forbidden Forest isn't a detention waiting to happen, it's a rite of passage. And 1/3 of Beauxbatons students aren't fully human. Imagine how exciting those schools must be on a day-to-day basis, Harry said dreamily. We have a basilisk. That's exciting, Ron said defensively. Not really, it's only attacked a cat. At Hogwarts, we need Voldemort himself to come and liven things up despite the fact that he's dead, Harry replied. Oh, honestly, Ron, it's just a name, Hermione said exasperated as the boy had flinched upon hearing Riddle's alias. This time, Harry had taken great pains to ensure that Hermione never succumbed to ridiculous wizarding practices of refusing to actually refer to Voldemort as anything but he who must not be named or you-know-who. After all, if they called him he who must not be named, then they were, in fact, naming him, and what if people didn't know who? How can you know who be causing problems if he's dead? Percy asked, frowning. Is he a ghost? No, he's just mostly dead, Harry explained. Mostly dead, Neville repeated. What's the difference? There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. Now, mostly dead is slightly alive. Now, all dead. Well, with all dead, there's usually only one thing that you can do, Luna said, grinning. Go through his clothes and look for loose change, Harry finished. I love Princess Bride. You know, he said, turning to his 3 best friends. I don't know what it is, but lately Luna's been beating you guys in the friends department hands down. It's not our fault we're not insane, Hermione said, crossing her arms. No offense, Luna. Why would I be offended? Luna asked. I've seen your version of sanity. It bores me. Hey, why were you up here? Neville asked. Isn't that as suspicious as us being up here, even if you are a prefect? In fact, I'd say it's even more suspicious as you're old enough to conceivably know how to petrify someone, and we aren't. Percy began, turning very red. Oh, he was probably just off making out with Penelope Clearwater, his girlfriend, Harry guessed. Just go down to dinner, Percy said hastily, shaking his head and hurrying away. Chapter 16. After making a quick stop at the Room of Requirements to pick up Ravenclaw's diadem, Harry stuck out to the Shrieking Shack to meet Sirius. Womtail's back. Sirius cut right to the chase. Harry nodded. I think so. At any rate, the Chamber of Secrets has been opened, and Mrs. Norris was petrified. Mrs. Norris? Sirius looked confused. Is that Filch's new cat? At Harry's nod, Sirius grinned. Excellent. I guess he's not all bad, after all. I mean, I will still attack him on sight, but at least I have this to mitigate the betrayal. You do realize that Pettigrew's being possessed by Voldemort, right? Harry asked. So really he petrified Mrs. Norris. Sirius looked speculative. You know, I never thought I'd say this, but maybe Voldemort isn't Dash. Oh, don't even go there, Harry interrupted. And besides, I unpetrified her almost immediately. Sirius looked thunderstruck and not a little horrified. Why would you do something so heinous? Harry rolled his eyes. Look, Sirius, I get that you don't like Filch or any of his cats Dash. That the understatement of the year, Sirius muttered. They are pure evil. But look at it from my perspective. I purchased quite a bit of mandrake potions during the summer, and if I didn't prove that they worked on the cat, no one else would have trusted me to use it on them given they thought I was the heir of Slytherin at the time, Harry pointed out. I guess I see your point, Sirius said reluctantly. But Merlin, Harry, only Lily was that prepared that she stocked up on cures for potential disasters. Harry snorted. To be fair, she did spend prolonged periods of time with you and your friends. Details. Sirius said dismissively. His eyes widened. Wait, they thought you were the heir of Slytherin? Harry nodded. As in they don't anymore? Another nod. Details. I merely convinced them that I would have found some way to market my powers of petrifaction if I actually had any, and apparently I've been spending so much time with Lockhart that they believe me, Harry explained, shrugging. And let me tell you, I am really loving this whole not being suspected of attacking the Muggleborns despite my mother and best friend status as Muggleborn. That's just, there are no words for that, Sirius said, shaking his head in awe. I know. I'm amazing, Harry said smugly. But on to business. I retrieved the diadem Horcrux from the Room of Requirements. Can I assume you've mastered Fiendfire? Sirius winced. For the most part. Sirius.
What?
Don't get me wrong, I can definitely destroy the Horcruxes with it and more or less aim it. It just takes me a little while to put it out. Dear God, Harry said, slightly annoyed. You've had 3 months. That's a lot of progress. I don't think you quite appreciate just how difficult Fiendfire is to master, Sirius defended. Remembering the first time he's seen it in action in a move that all at once destroyed one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, cost Crabbe his life, and made Draco forever indebted to him, Harry shook his head. No, you're right. I'm sorry. It's just uncontrollable fire on Hogwarts grounds? This sounds like a very bad idea. Sirius shrugged. Meh, it probably is, but at least there is very little risk of lycanthropy, unlike some of our other exploits. There is that, Harry agreed. So, is that all you've been doing all this time? Learning Fiendfire. Not quite. I also anonymously sold Creature, don't even ask, to the Green Grasses, found what I believe to be the Locket Horcrux, and have been sending Remus letters twice a week. He hasn't actually answered any of them, but at least he hasn't turned them over to the Aurors, Sirius told Harry. Well, that's something, I guess. And let me see that locket. When Sirius handed it to him, Harry carefully inspected it. Yes, this is definitely it. You should have at least told Creature you were going to destroy this before you sold him. He's not that bad, really. Sirius snorted. I'll believe it when I see it. You never will now. You up and sold him. Harry exclaimed. He had his chance. I put up with him for a whole week before I resorted to drastic measures, Sirius shot back. How generous, Harry said wryly. Why would he care about the locket anyway? Sirius asked disinterestedly. Or is he just obsessed with any dark, pure-blood relic? Because your brother gave his life to steal it from Voldemort and entrusted Creature with its destruction right before he died? Harry suggested. Sirius just stared at him, gaping. Did I forget to mention that this summer? Harry asked sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. Yes, I believe you did, Sirius said once he found his voice. My little brother, working to bring down Voldemort and discovering about the Horcruxes. He probably thought Voldemort only had one, but still I never would have thought. After giving Sirius a moment to collect himself, Harry placed the diadem and the locket on the floor of the shrieking shack. Well, shall we? Once the cup joined its fellow dark objects on the ground, Sirius cast Fiendfire and burned down the entire building and surrounding area. It wasn't very practical, perhaps, but it was certainly cathartic. Harry. Ron pulled Harry into an unused classroom. Why are you kidnapping me? Harry asked, eyeing Hermione and Neville, who were already in the room, suspiciously. We're not kidnapping you, Hermione said, rolling her eyes. So you'll let me leave this room right now? Harry asked, heading for the door. Sorry, mate, but you have to hear us out first, Ron told him, blocking the exit. I repeat, why are you kidnapping me? Harry asked again. Because you have a tendency to be overly dramatic and get everyone involved with things, and we need to keep this quiet, Hermione explained. Plus you're not going to like what they came up with, Neville added. What they came up with? Harry repeated. You mean you don't agree? Nope, Neville said cheerfully. Because unlike them, I actually have some modicum of faith in you.
Modicum.
Ron looked confused. Some small measure, Hermione supplied automatically. And we have plenty of faith in Harry. Harry and Neville both looked at her skeptically. She flushed.
What?
Just because I'm not willing to accept everything that comes out of your mouth doesn't mean I don't have faith in you. For God's sake, last week you told Percy Ron wanted a sex change. I don't see your point, Harry told her bluntly. Oh, never mind, Hermione said, irritated. Now, while I'm not saying that I doubt your, Scar's expert knowledge of the attacks, I am suggesting that perhaps what was it? Supposedly dead illegal Ratonymagus the supposedly dead illegal parent betraying Ratonymagus, Harry corrected. Right him. Hermione agreed absently. He probably has some help in the castle. While Professor Dumbledore doesn't always have the most inspired hiring practices, the defense against the dark arts teacher is usually the only one that ever gives anyone any trouble, and Lockhart doesn't really seem the type to pull something like this. Which is why we think it's Malfoy, Ron continued. Harry looked at their serious faces for a moment before promptly bursting out laughing. Oh, so that's how it is? Hermione asked angrily. You can entertain notions of great pumpkins and garden gnome conspiracies, but not take attacks on the school seriously? With great effort, Harry managed to quell his laughter. Sorry, Hermione, I am taking you seriously, but really? Draco? How did you come to that conclusion? We know he thinks Muggleborns are scum and said, you'll be next, mudbloods, when he saw the writing on the wall on Halloween, Ron said as if it were obvious. Had Harry really been that quick to jump to conclusions back then? That was quite a depressing thought. What more do you need? Proof. Harry suggested. Beside him, Neville groaned. Oh, you really should not have said that. Harry was puzzled. Why not? They have a plan to make Polyjuice potions so we can sneak into the Slytherin common room, pose as Crabbe and Goyle, and ask him directly if he's responsible. Blatantly ignoring the fact that no one in their right mind would confide in those two, they also want to steal some of the ingredients to make the potion from Snape's private supply by blowing up a cauldron, potentially hurting and/or killing anyone in the immediate area, depending on what we're making and if they swallow any of the potion. As a diversion, Neville said, shaking his head. I told them that not even you would go for that. Of course not, Harry said, shocked. That kind of safety risk is just unacceptable. What's the good of finding out that Draco's involved and stopping a few couple-hour pettifactions if we get half of the first-year Gryffindors and Slytherins killed? Then find a different way for us to get the ingredients, Hermione said determinedly. Because one way or another, we're doing this. If there is any chance at all that Malfoy is involved, we have to find out. I know he's your friend and all, but look at this objectively, I am, Harry retorted. You two are the ones blinded by your hatred of him. I'll order your damn potion, but I'm telling you, it's not him. How do you know? Ron demanded. Just because he's nice to you doesn't mean that I know, Harry interrupted again. But how could he possibly be the heir of Slytherin? His mother is a black, and there are a lot of people with black blood running around even if Sirius is the only living wizard to have that name. Maybe your godfather is the heir of Slytherin. Ron had a new theory. Why would my fugitive godfather break into Hogwarts just to set a snake on people? There are much more efficient ways to kill people. You said the culprit was being possessed by an evil diary. Neville, who was quickly becoming the voice of reason, reminded him. Harry glared witheringly at him. Thanks so much for that. I try. My godfather would never write in a diary. He thinks having a diary automatically reduces your badass status by 20%, Harry explained. How would you know that? Hermione asked. Harry smirked and opened his mouth. And if you say your scar told you, then so help me, she threatened. Harry shrugged. Then I've got nothing. Another point in Draco's favor. Professor Snape is not a Parselmouth. What does that have to do with anything? Hermione asked exasperatedly. Because Parseltongue is a hereditary trait. If Professor Snape can't speak it, and thus can't possibly be the heir, then how could Draco? Harry asked innocently. There's always the possibility that Malfoy is, in fact, a Malfoy, Ron spoke up. Harry stared at him uncomprehendingly. Fine, don't help us, Hermione sniffed. Ron and I can do it by ourselves since we're clearly the only ones taking the safety of this school seriously. Will you at least buy us the potion? Sure, Harry agreed. Just make sure that the hair actually comes from the person you want to transform into and not their cat. What dash? Hermione began. Don't worry about it. Now, as you two are clearly nuts, Neville and I are off to find Luna. Mr. Potter, McGonagall called as Harry was heading into the castle after a Quidditch practice. She looked unusually grim. Yes. Harry asked politely, wondering what he could have possibly done to upset her that she knew about. He drew a blank. Another student has been found petrified, so if you could take some mandrake potion up to the hospital wing, that would be much appreciated, McGonagall told him. Sure. I can go now, Harry agreed as he followed her up to the hospital wing. Who is it anyway? You probably don't know him, but it is a Hufflepuff named Zachariah Smith, the Transfiguration professor informed him. Harry threw back his head and groaned. Can't we just leave him like Mr. Potter's? McGonagall sounded appalled. 20 points from Gryffindor for your callous remarks. Yes. Harry cheered. Mr. Potter's? Harry. Draco shouted the minute he saw him. Whoops, Harry said, cursing himself for letting himself get caught. He'd been so diligent avoiding Draco recently, and now it appeared that his luck was coming to an end. Now that I've finally managed to corner you after 2 months, would you care to explain this? Draco demanded, chucking a rather thick book at his head. After it hit him, Harry picked it up and glanced down at it. It would appear to be Professor Lockhart's autobiography, Magical Me.
Why?
Did you forget how to read, or go blind or something? No, I did not, Draco growled. Have you seen the section on my parentage? No, I haven't, Harry answered truthfully. After all, he hadn't bothered to read Lockhart's books, as he was always forced to pay attention in class when Lockhart made him help reenact different scenes. Unlike last time, though, he didn't mind. His already top-notch acting skills were rapidly improving under all the different parts he had to play. Not everyone is obsessed with your parentage, Draco. He devoted an entire chapter to how the touching story of my mother's love affair with Professor Snape changed his life. Draco yelled. Your mother had a love affair with Professor Snape? Harry repeated wide-eyed. No, she didn't, Draco scowled. But you just said dash, Harry began. Lockhart heard that ridiculous rumor you made up, believed it, published it, and now all of his mindless fangirls will believe it, and this will never end, Draco complained. I hope you're happy. I'm always happy, Harry said blithely. And I don't see how you can possibly blame me. I mean, sure, I started the rumor, but I only mentioned it the one time. Fred and George did all the rest. And that time at the bookstore over the summer, when you wanted to avoid getting your picture taken, Draco pointed out. And those are only the times I know about. Okay, Harry conceded. Only the 2, then. But really, it's not my fault, dash. You said it right in front of him, Draco pointed out. You know, Harry said, crossing his arms. This is why I've been avoiding you. Just stop spreading the rumors, okay? Draco entreated. Sooner or later, someone will mention it to my father. He hasn't heard already? Harry asked, surprised. But it's been months. And he was in the bookstore the second time I said it. No one really wants to upset my father by implying my mother was cheating on him with a close friend of his, Draco explained. A lot of people are scared of him and his money. I'm not really sure why he didn't catch that incident in the bookstore, but he was kind of preoccupied that day. I'm really not sure why. I'll make an honest effort, Harry promised. Draco sighed. I guess that's the most I can hope for. Chapter 17. Hey, Harry, Cedric greeted cordially as Harry handed over a vial of mandrake potion to revive Cho Chang, who wasn't technically dating Cedric yet, but everyone could tell it was only a matter of time. How Harry missed that the first time, he'd never know. It wasn't like they were even trying to be subtle or anything. I never did thank you for ordering us those brooms, did I? I honestly can't remember, Harry confessed. I was literally mobbed after that came out. Well, he paused, trying to think back. Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were the most serious offenders, which is strange because usually Gryffindors are the most exuberant. I think my own house may have been slightly annoyed that I destroyed the advantage my new brooms gave us when I gave you guys them too. As for Slytherin, well, they became convinced that I hated them because I didn't bother getting them brooms. Never mind that Draco already bought them the same kind. Cedric eyed Harry carefully. You don't seem the type to buy into house prejudices like that, and I think anything you say to the contrary is just in the spirit of friendly house rivalry. I also refuse to believe you could be so careless as to remember to get two teams' brooms so as not to inconvenience your rival seekers, but completely forget about a third house that has a friend of yours a seeker. Let me tell you, no one understands how you two are friends. It is the most bizarre friendship rivalry we've seen in a while. What do you mean? Harry feigned innocence. You have opposing views on virtually everything. You're both very visible members of the two houses that buy into house rivalry the most. You refuse to let a certain rumor about his parentage die. You hate each other's friends and act like rivals half the time, Cedric quickly rattled off. All in good fun, Harry assured him. And if you don't think it was an accident that I didn't get Slytherin brooms, what do you think? You knew what Malfoy would do, and that's why you bought the other three teams' brooms, Cedric speculated. What? Do you think I'm spying on him or something? Harry asked, pretending to be offended. Cedric didn't seem to buy it, though, and simply shrugged. How would I know? Maybe your scar told you. Harry didn't get a chance to answer, because at that moment the mandrake potion took effect, and Cho's eyes fluttered open. Cedric, she asked, confused. What happened? Harry left her future boyfriend to explain, and headed off to go visit Hagrid. He was right about possessed, Pettigrew having different victims, and was glad that everyone appeared to be taking his advice about using a mirror. Still, constantly being summoned to the hospital wing to administer the potion, which he refused to give up for fear that Wormtail would break into the hospital wing and destroy Harry's supply, was really starting to get annoying. He wished possessed Pettigrew would just hurry up and make his move. Well, that was a huge waste of time, Harry muttered. Sirius had sent him a letter via Hedwig asking why he didn't try to kill the basilisk, now as he knew how to kill one safely, and was also privy to the location of the Chamber of Secrets. He'd woken up early the morning of the match against Slytherin and snuck out to Myrtle's bathroom. Myrtle had been surprised to see him but pacified once he transfigured a bar of soap into chocolate, and she could pretend she could taste it. Once Harry got to the chamber, he encountered very little problems. It took him a minute to get back into the swing of pretending the stone carvings were actual snakes and speaking Parseltongue again, for he had been unable to utilize that particular talent of his once he was no longer a Horcrux, but he quickly made his way towards the main room. After arriving, he had encountered a little roadblock. Namely, he could not make the stupid Slytherin statue open up. It had taken him a little while, but he had eventually remembered that riddle had said, "Speak to me, Slytherin," greatest of the Hogwarts Four, and the basilisk had appeared. Unfortunately, when Harry tried that and a myriad of other passwords, the statue remained impassive. Harry had no idea what he was doing wrong. Had Riddle done something else to prepare the chamber in the time after his arrival and before Harry had shown up? Harry didn't think so, but who knew? Another, more likely, possibility in Harry's opinion was that Slytherin had trained or enchanted the basilisk to only respond to the air of Slytherin. Harry, for all his many talents and the piece of Voldemort's soul that currently resided in him, was not a descendant. Then again, Voldemort's Horcrux was the one currently opening up the chamber. Was it because Riddle's soul was whole before the diary Horcrux, and so he had more soul to put into the diary? Or because the diary was essentially the same as the 16-year-old Riddle, and Harry was a completely different person with a piece of Riddle trapped inside of him, who really knew how ancient magic like that worked anyway? When Harry arrived back in Myrtle's bathroom, after shrinking and pocketing all of the shed basilisk skin in sight, basilisks were so rare that it had to be worth something, right? He found Luna eating Myrtle's chocolate and describing the taste in great detail for her. "What are you doing here?" Harry asked, nonplussed. "Did you know that there is a Quidditch match today? The whole school has been in an uproar since they discovered you were missing," Luna responded, examining the entrance to the chamber with great interest. "So, you came to look for me?" Harry asked. At Luna's nod, he continued. "Why here's? Where else would you be?" Luna replied primly. "Is this the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets?" Crap, Luna wasn't supposed to find out about that.
Actually, no one was supposed to find out about that.
Still, if anyone did, he supposed Luna was really the best person to do so. It would be simpler if he just obliviated her, but Harry refused to do that as a matter of principle. Stupid morals and suspicions that he himself had been obliviated a few times in his time. "Yes," Harry said finally, hesitantly. "I see," Luna nodded sagely. "And I can't tell anyone, or else whoever is attacking the students will know that you know." "Exactly," Harry said, relieved that she understood. "I can't get to the basilisk because I can't find a way to access it. I think it's because I'm not related to Slytherin, but I'm not sure. If people found out about the entrance, they could try to guard it, but sooner or later, Pet the diary-possessed parent betrayer would find a way around it. And in the meantime, the panic would be incredible, and we'd lose a chance to destroy the basilisk once and for all and keep future generations safe." "That's very risky," Luna told him solemnly. "But I trust you. Am I right in thinking that, because of the Slytherin connection, only a Parselmouth would be able to open it? Are you a Parselmouth?" "I always did underestimate you, Luna," Harry said with a wry smile. "Now what time is it? When does the match start?" "About 20 minutes ago," Luna said casually.
"What?"
Harry screeched. "Why didn't you tell me? If you were that concerned about arriving to the match on time, you really should have brought a watch," Luna chastised him. Harry practically flew up to his dorm room to grab his broom and then literally flew out the window and towards the pitch. "And Slytherin has just scored again, bringing it up to 60-20 Slytherin," Lee Jordan was saying as Harry approached. "The Gryffindor team is clearly feeling pessimistic about their chances without a seeker." "Where is Harry?" At first no one realized that Lee had spotted Harry, but he quickly continued. "I don't believe it. 30 minutes into the match, Gryffindor seeker Harry Potter finally deigns to show up. I'm not sure where in the world he was, as even the Weasley twins failed to locate him, but hopefully now he'll be able to turn this thing around." "Jordan," McGonagall admonished. "Do try and pretend to be impartial." "But Professor, I didn't even insult those dirty, rotten dash," Lee began, smirking. "Not insulting is not the same as being impartial," McGonagall pointed out. "Honestly, it's time like these that I wonder why I don't have a commentator from every house so that I can always be sure to have someone on hand without a personal interest in the match." "You know you'd miss me," Lee teased before clearing his throat. "I've been instructed to inform you that Harry is not riding the same Nimbus 2001 brooms that the other 27 Quidditch players are using. He says that this is because he is not only more than good enough to outfly the other 3 seekers blindfolded on his current broom, but that he is refusing to use something his friend? Rival? Who even knows what they are? Anyway, he is refusing to use the same broom as Draco Malfoy. And he would also like to state publicly that he believes the popular theory that Malfoy is Professor Snape's love child is a vicious, vicious lie, and you all should forget about it." "Harry," Draco shouted as Harry flew past him. "You said you'd quit it." "I did," Harry said innocently. "I was just going above and beyond and trying to do some damage control by stating that I believe it to be false." "You only believe it's false?" Draco demanded. "You're the one who started it." I'm sure I don't know nearly enough about your parents' relationship with each, and with Snape to be able to tell one way or another with any degree of certainty, Harry said delicately. There was movement in the corner of his eye. Duck, will you? Draco looked confused, but automatically did as Harry asked. Harry raised his wand at the bludger he had already noticed following him, and was fairly certain had been cursed by Dobby and cast a quiet reducto. As the bludger exploded, Harry spotted the snitch and dove after it. Draco, reeling from the explosion, did not see Harry's move until he was halfway to the snitch, and even though he shot after him, he was too late to stop Harry's hand from closing over the snitch. How could you be so reckless, Mr. Potter? McGonagall demanded after the match. I know that you have little regard for the rules, but this is ridiculous. You could have seriously injured yourself and Mr. Malfoy, and you destroyed Hogwarts property. As much as this pains me to do so, I have no choice but to assign you detention every Saturday night for a month and to take 50 points from Gryffindor. Harry had honestly never considered that he could have hurt Draco once the bludger exploded, but was thankful nonetheless that he was all right. As for his punishment, well, who am I to be serving detention with? Professor Lockhart has already asked for you personally, McGonagall told him, her voice laced with slight distaste. She never had thought very highly of the old fraud. Excellent, Harry grinned. 50 points was about the same amount he and Hermione managed to earn on an average day, to his eternal shame and Hermione's delight, and as for the detentions, he promised me he'd teach me all about how to answer fan mail and tell normal letters apart from the nasty kind that either hex you or have something wretched inside of it without opening it, Harry beamed. McGonagall looked annoyed, but since teachers could technically assign whatever they wanted for detentions as long as it was legal, she could do nothing. That night, as the obligatory Gryffindor is better than all the other houses for whatever we've managed to do now party was winding down, Hermione and Ron cornered him and cast a privacy charm to the area they were standing in. Neville hadn't bothered to come over and was instead chatting amiably with Ginny, so Ron had to go and physically drag him over. Not before Ginny kicked him and accused him of trying to monopolize all their friends, though. When did Neville and Ginny become friends? Harry really would have to look into that. Perhaps it was when he was off doing whatever he happened to feel like and Ron and Hermione were investigating Draco. After all, Neville had stayed with the Weasleys for a month over the summer, and with Ginny nice and non-possessed, there was nothing stopping them from hanging out when Neville's other friends ditched him. How did he do it? Hermione demanded once Ron stopped complaining about demon sisters. How did who do what? Harry asked, honestly having no idea what she was talking about. Hermione sighed in exasperation. How did Malfoy fix that bludger? You think Malfoy fixed the bludger? Harry asked carefully. I'm the one who blew it up. That was some explosion, too, Ron grinned. And, did you see the look on Malfoy's face? Priceless. That bludger was following you around, Hermione explained. It must have been hexed, and who else could have benefited from it besides Malfoy? How could you tell it was following Harry around? Neville asked reasonably. The game only lasted 5 minutes, once Harry decided to show up. Where were you, anyways? Bathroom, Harry deadpanned. For 4 hours? Neville asked skeptically. When you gotta go? Harry began slyly. You? Hermione interrupted. Honestly. And I'm positive that bludger was following Harry around. Still, Madam Hooch checked the balls before the game starts, and nothing was wrong then. Wait, she checked the balls for signs of tampering with her wand? Harry asked. Hermione looked at him strangely.
Yes.
How else would she do it?
Damn.
There goes my squib theory. Harry muttered. Hermione didn't understand. What dash? Never mind, Harry cut her off. He didn't think he had ever mentioned his theory from the year before about Madam Hooch being a squib when she failed to use magic to do basic things like break Neville's fall during their first flying lesson. Do you honestly think that Draco is skilled enough at magic he could bewitch a bludger? All Quidditch balls have several layers of enchantment to protect them from tampering and make them damn near impervious to magic. Draco's only a second year. I'm widely viewed as a freaking prodigy. God knows why, and I don't think I could have tampered with that bludger. Then what do you suggest happened? Hermione demanded, folding her arms across her chest. House elf with a grudge. Harry suggested. I thought house elves loved you. I mean, they did adopt you, Ron pointed out. Hermione glared at him. You are so not helping. Ron shrugged. I read it in the Quibbler. Hermione looked like she dearly wished to strangle him.
What?
Ron asked defensively. I got a free subscription after I won their unusual creature crossword puzzle. It was really cool. They could tell who finished it first because once it was completed you tapped your wand to it and said, submit, and if you were right, your paper asked for your name, and when you wrote it down, it transmitted the information to the Quibbler. But it's all a bunch of rubbish. Hermione insisted. If you two are going to start arguing again, can I go back to the parties? Neville asked. They ignored him. So Neville turned to Harry. You might as well, Harry told him. They might be a while. Are you coming? Neville asked. Or are you going to make things worse by adding your own commentary and reminding them of more incidents to be upset about again? Tempting as that is, no. Harry shook his head. I'm heading to bed. Already? Neville was understandably surprised. Harry rarely was in bed before midnight, and it was only 10:30. I have a house elf with a grudge to meet with, remember? I thought you were kidding, Neville said mildly. I wasn't, Harry assured him. Well, at least about the house elf part. He actually has a bit of an obsession with me, but he took a knife for me once, so I'm not going to yell at him about it. Whatever, Neville said, heading towards the food table and waving at Ginny. When Harry reached the empty dorm room, he saw Dobby waiting for him on his bed. Hello, Dobby, he said pleasantly in his best Dumbledore impression. He had spent hours perfecting it in front of a mirror, but try as he might, could never manage that twinkling eye thing that was such an essential part of the act. Perhaps it was just a side effect of using legilimency? Dobby looked very nervous and near tears. Harry Potter came back to school. I told you I would, Harry said. And I'm not leaving no matter what you try. Stealing Ron's dad's car to drive to the Hogwarts Express was kind of fun, and the fixed bludger was really only a mild inconvenience. But even if you truly do something that might make me want to leave, I won't do it. You know why? Dobby shook his head. Because I'm stubborn as hell, and will probably just view that as a challenge, Harry replied matter-of-factly. Harry Potter does not understand, protested Dobby desperately. Dobby has heard about the great Harry Potter, and what he has done already. He is being good to all creatures, and the house elves love him. Harry Potter must not stay at Hogwarts and be killed. He must leave and continue to do good. Harry thought that Dobby's account was rather too generous, but that was Dobby all right. Look, Harry said gently. I know about the diary. I know about the basilisk. I know who has the diary right now, and I know that he is going to want to get me involved. I also know how to kill both the diary and the snake, and am fairly certain I know how to stop the man. I appreciate your concern, but I can take care of myself. Dobby has no doubt that Harry Potter can, but Dobby does not like to take chances and does not want to lose such a great and powerful wizard. Dobby had no idea the great Harry Potter was so clever. Dobby gushed, tears springing to his eyes again. Yeah. Harry said dismissively. He heard footsteps. Someone was coming. Just as he was about to tell Dobby to go, a thought occurred to him. Wait, didn't Draco order you not to try to save my life or to try and drive me from the castle? To Harry's surprise, Dobby looked downright mischievous. Dobby wasn't trying to save the great Harry Potter's life, nor was he trying to send him away from Hogwarts. Dobby was trying to break Harry Potter's arm. And with that, Dobby was gone. Harry had definitely underestimated him. Chapter 18. Harry awoke the next morning to the sensation of 3 stinging hexes cast in quick succession. Ow, he complained as he reached for his wand and disarmed his unknown assailant. What was that for? Sorry, Harry, Percy said apologetically. But I've heard that trying to wake you up conventionally just gets you hexed for your trouble. So, you thought you'd get in a preemptive strike? Harry asked, annoyed, as he tossed Percy his wand back. What's so important that you're waking me up at this ungodly hour? It's 8:30, Percy informed him, rather pompously. Harry rather marveled at the prefect's ability to sound pompous even when doing such mundane things as giving the time. Draco had that same tendency sometimes. It must be a pureblood thing. No one should be up before 9 on a day they don't have class unless it is a matter of life or death, Harry said seriously. And I'm sure Ron and Neville have explained what happens when people do wake me up. And considering that those are 2 of my best friends, imagine how badly I'd hex anybody else.
Percy gulped.
Indeed. Well, as it turns out, this is an emergency. My sister was petrified last night. Ginny? Harry repeated disbelievingly. Talk about ironic. She was about the last person Harry would have ever expected to get petrified, aside from himself, of course. Clearly Riddle was getting fed up with the lack of results his basilisk was getting due to Harry's ready supply of mandrake potion and had decided it was open season instead of bothering with verifying someone's blood status. Not like Pettigrew would even have a way of finding that out, unlike Ginny. What was she even doing out? There's no way a basilisk could fit in the Gryffindor common room, and chances are if it did, someone else would have noticed it. Yes, well, Percy continued, looking a bit awkward. She wasn't in the common room, and neither was the boy they found her with. Harry choked. Boy? She's bloody 11. Percy peered curiously at him. Most people your age wouldn't reach that conclusion quite so quickly, if at all. Harry shrugged. Since when have I ever been most people? So who was with her? And are they both all right? Neville Longbottom, Percy replied promptly. I believe he is a friend of yours.
Do you have
any idea what Ginny and Neville were doing out after curfew together? They weren't very far away from the fat lady, and Peeves was found petrified nearby, so they probably saw the basilisk through him. Wow, Harry said, somewhat shakily. That was lucky. To think that they hadn't even thought to bring a mirror. If Peeves hadn't happened to be there, that never would have happened the last time. Perhaps it was because Harry's timely interventions meant that no one was petrified for long, that no one was taking the threat seriously this time. That could be a problem. He'd have to give Gryffindor a lecture about that later, and hoped they spread the word. Indeed, Percy nodded. If something had happened to Ginny, he shook his head, leaving the thought unfinished. Follow me. You kill my cats. Filch accused the moment the 2 stepped into the hospital wing. Harry blinked. Unless I'm very much mistaken, which is a very real possibility given my almost constant sense of déjà vu, didn't we already have this conversation? You did, Dumbledore said gravely. But alas, Mrs. Norris was attacked again last night. That's what for peoples? Harry asked. At Dumbledore's nod, he continued, that's quite a lot for one attack. Oh, here. He handed Madame Pomfrey 3 vials of mandrake potion. Sorry I don't have one for Mrs. Norris, but I had only heard about Neville, Ginny, and Peeves. She doesn't need your bloody potion. She's dead. Filch roared. Oh, Harry said quietly, taken aback. He hadn't expected that. His friends and fellow students, though tending to get more careless as time went by, at least had the option of carrying around a mirror. Mrs. Norris not only hadn't had a chance in that regard, but apparently hadn't been standing behind Peeves at the time of the basilisk's appearance. He felt horrible for Filch. Granted, the man was unpleasant in the extreme, and Harry had often fantasized about killing that accursed cat, but he would never have actually done it. She was all Filch had, really, and being the squib caretaker in a school full of wizarding children who hated him, Harry resolved to write to Mrs. Figg the minute this was over. He had an idea. I'm sorry, Harry said lamely. No, you're not, Filch said bitterly. You hated her the way everyone always hated her. She wouldn't have given you any trouble if you'd just follow the rules. If those 2, he jerked his head towards Ginny and Neville, had just stayed in their common room where they belonged, this never would have happened. It never should have happened. With that, Filch stormed out of the hospital wing. Harry stood there awkwardly until he heard Ginny start to cough. Are you okay? He asked, rushing to her side. Yeah, what happened? She asked slowly. You were attacked by the basilisk last night. It killed Mrs. Norris and petrified you, Neville and Peeves, Harry explained. I never thought I'd say it. Neville spoke up, also awake now, but we really owe him one. Let's also never mention this to him lest he tries to enlist our help in some inane prank that will earn us detentions every day for a month. Or cost us hundreds of house points, Ginny agreed. On the other hand, Harry said quickly, you do owe him your lives. If you're that desperate to lose hundreds of house points, why don't you work with Peeves to pay him back for saving us? Neville shot back. Dumbledore looked outright shocked at the thought of anyone actively seeking to lose points. After mulling it over for a moment, he decided that Neville must be kidding and still coping with his recent traumatic experience. What were you and Miss Weasley doing outside of your common room after curfew, Mr. Longbottom? He asked. Well, Neville began, sounding a bit embarrassed. Ron was giving us a hard time, because he wanted Neville to go over by him and Hermione, but he didn't want me there, and when Neville said he'd rather keep talking to me, Ron blew up and started accusing me of trying to steal all of his friends, Ginny said bluntly. So we left. We didn't go far, and we didn't think anything would happen, but it did, Miss Weasley, Dumbledore said gently. I know, she said softly. I'm sorry. I hope you learned from this that the curfew was put in place to protect you, especially now that there is a basilisk on the loose. Still, that's 20 points from Gryffindor, Dumbledore informed them gravely. Given the serious nature of the discussion, Harry held himself back from cheering. A couple weeks later, Harry himself had almost settled into this strange pattern of reflection checking, random petrifactions, and almost instant revivals. Almost, but not quite, because unlike everyone else, he had the memory of what had happened the last time the basilisk was unleashed. Currently, he was standing in the Great Hall with Ron, Hermione, and Neville waiting for the first and only, to Harry's recollection, meeting of the Dueling Club to begin. I'm just saying, I don't see how nobody's heard about any of this, Hermione was saying. I mean, for God's sake, the attack started a month and a half ago. Who would write home about this? Ron asked, looking at her as if she were mental. Our parents would pull us out of school faster than you can say. Harry has an unlimited supply of Mandrake Potion, and we all check around every corner with mirrors, so we're really not in much danger. Ron, you could do quite a bit by the time you say all of that, Neville said, amused. Isn't the normal expression, faster than you can say Quidditch? Yeah, but I figure my way is more appropriate to the situation, Ron replied. I do not have an unlimited supply, Harry corrected him. In fact, I really need to order some more. I'm just glad everyone does keep using mirrors, or else things could start to get serious. Could start? Hermione repeated incredulously. Harry, there's one of the most poisonous creatures known to man traveling freely around the school and attacking students. It's already serious. And I know that no one wants to worry their parents, and we do seem to be suffering no permanent damage. Except Mrs. Norris, of course, but why hasn't there been any mention of this in any alternative forums? The Daily Prophet, at least. I've been bribing them, Harry said simply. You've been what? Hermione shrieked. Keep it down, Harry said irritably. This isn't exactly public knowledge. But Harry, you can't just dash Hermione began helplessly. Actually, I can, and let me just say that it really says something about a society if the only respectable newspaper is not only owned by the government, but is willing to be bribed by a 12-year-old. And it's not like I'm doing this just for kicks, although I am perhaps enjoying making them write something that I approve of for once. What justification could you possibly have? Hermione demanded. If certain factions hear word that Dumbledore can't keep us safe from the basilisk that is running wild through our school, they will remove him and appoint a ministry stooge as headmaster instead. That not only won't help, it will probably make the situation 10 times worse. I don't want this to get any more complicated than it already is, and turning this into a political game will do that, Harry told her. Hey, is that Lockhart? Ron asked. With Snape? Are either of them qualified to teach dueling? Hermione asked with pursed lips. Maybe not Lockhart, Harry conceded. But Snape knows a ton about dark arts, and I gather he's a rather competent duelist. Perhaps, Hermione allowed. But I still think it should be Flitwick. He was a dueling champion when he was younger, you know. Harry watched as Lockhart and Snape's demonstration went almost exactly the way it had before, with Snape blasting Lockhart into a wall. Still, Harry had coached Lockhart a bit on what to do in case he was ever overpowered and didn't want to admit it, and so instead of protesting that he knew Snape was going to do it all along and sounding entirely unconvincing, Lockhart went the more practical route of smiling and thanking Snape for the fine example and warning the students not to put so much power into their spells. In fact, Lockhart almost made it wound like it was Snape's mistake that had him flying into the wall, not Lockhart's. Snape, predictably, looked murderous and his hand twitched for his wand, so Lockhart hastily split the observers into pairs. Snape walked by and paired Harry and Neville together, Hermione with Millicent Bulstrode, and Ron with Draco. "Wands at the ready," Lockhart shouted. "When I count to dash." Lockhart didn't get any further as Ron and Draco had begun hexing each other the minute Snape's back was turned. Looking rather put out, Snape eventually separated them and called them up to the stage so they could try again without endangering everyone around them. Lockhart had actually tried to use Harry and Neville, but Snape had pointed out that Harry never took anything seriously unless it involved extreme emotional trauma on the part of one of his friends, or if someone died and Lockhart was forced to concede the point. Snape walked over to Draco and Lockhart went over by Ron. Harry was too far away to hear what they were saying, but from the smirk on Draco's face and the alarmed look on Ron's once Lockhart dropped his wand, he had a fairly good idea of what was going to happen next. The only question was what to do about it. 3, 2, 1, go, Lockhart shouted. Serpensortia. Malfoy yelled the second Lockhart said go, not giving Ron any chance to react. Harry watched dispassionately as a large, black snake burst forth from Draco's wand. Was embarrassing Ron really worth the trouble that both Draco and Snape could get in for setting a potentially poisonous snake? Harry really wasn't sure if it was, but hoped that it wasn't because he just couldn't believe that Snape would be so irresponsible on a bunch of school children. Although, to be fair, it was quite impressive that Draco managed to pull off a snake conjuring at the tender age of 12. Harry didn't think he learned how to do that until sometime either 5th or 6th year. Then again, he hadn't grown up knowing he was a wizard and playing with magic whenever his dead parents weren't looking, either. Harry slowly made his way up to the stage as his peers stood transfixed by the large serpent. "Don't move, Weasley," Snape said lazily, twirling his wand between his fingers. "I'll get rid of it." He seemed to be in no hurry, though, so that snake had better be harmless. Harry thought he heard somewhere that the larger snakes were often non-toxic, but could crush people, so setting that snake on Ron was still horribly unprofessional, and if the look on his friend's face was any indication, incredibly traumatizing. Ron was literally shaking. At least it wasn't spiders. "Allow me," shouted Lockhart, unable to resist the opportunity to show off. He waved his wand with a flourish, and there was a loud bang that sent the snake flying into the air. When it landed, it was understandably enraged and heading straight for Justin Finch-Fletchley. Again.
Was he just snake bait or something?
Harry groaned. He had a plan for this, but he wasn't quite sure that it would work considering everyone was well aware that a giant snake was running around the castle. "Look, the guy who attacked you didn't mean to. He's just one of the worst wizards I've ever met. I know you're mad and probably confused as hell and certainly didn't ask for this, but if you bite anyone, you'll only get yourself killed," Harry told the snake in Parseltongue. He climbed onto the stage and beckoned the snake towards him. "Just calm down and come with me. If you just slowly come to me, they won't hurt you. I'm the only one who can understand you here, and if you don't listen to me, who knows what they'll do?" The snake looked at him for a long moment and then slowly began making its way in Harry's general direction. Draco, Harry noticed with almost malicious glee, visibly paled and gulped as the snake slithered past him. Served him right. For those of you who are undoubtedly concocting fantastic scenarios in your head about how I'm the heir of Slytherin after all because I can speak Parseltongue, I want you to look very closely at my hands. See how I'm gesturing for the snake to stay on the stage with me where you won't be in any danger? See how I'm totally not endangering anyone or egging the snake on? And yes, I'm talking to you, Justin and Ernie. You guys jump to conclusions more rapidly than Ron and Hermione. Harry shook his head despairingly. Ernie bristled slightly at the implied insult. Clearly, he had also noticed Ron and Hermione's proclivity for jumping to conclusions. Actually, it was more like skydiving to conclusions. Then what were you saying to it? Ernie challenged. Harry almost rolled his eyes. Did Ernie honestly think Harry would be telling the snake to do something nefarious and then confess it? Maybe he would have last time, but Harry had been spending far too much time with Slytherins recently to do something quite so inane. It's basically been variations of "come over by me so people don't kill you," he said finally. Snape was the first to recover from the shockwaves Harry's announcement of sorts that he was a Parselmouth had sent through the room and quickly vanished the snake. "Thank you, Professor," Harry said brightly. "I'm glad you saw fit to clean up the mess you caused by telling Draco to cast that spell. 10 points from Gryffindor for your cheek, Potter," Snape snapped. Harry grinned. He had a vague suspicion that Snape knew how much he enjoyed losing points, but helped him anyway in the vain hope that Dumbledore would actually let someone other than Harry win the House Cup. In case anyone's interested, now that my Parselmouth abilities is public knowledge, I'm here to announce that I'm willing to translate a conversation you want to have with a snake. Any snake, I don't care, just bring it to me, for however long you want it, 2 sickles per 5 minutes. Harry could swear that he heard Hermione groaning somewhere in the audience. I also want to reiterate again that I am not the heir of Slytherin, and if I were then, I definitely wouldn't be eating the cost of the Mandrake potions and start charging for them. But no, instead I am giving them out for free to anyone who needs them with no benefit for myself. Harry paused. Well, technically I'm using them as a tax deductible, but other than that, it's completely selfless. Remember, anytime you want to talk to a serpent, let me know. Now, if that's all, it's been a great dueling meeting, but now I'm off to bed. With that, Harry walked off the stage and out of the Great Hall, leaving a largely stunned audience behind him. Chapter 19. Harry, I'm glad I caught you, Percy said eagerly, springing up as Harry descended the dormitory staircase first thing the next morning. Given you appear to be waiting for me, that's not really all that surprising, Harry said yawning. Still, at least you didn't try waking me up this time. Yes, well, I wanted to ask you what the hell you thought you were doing? Going down to breakfast? Harry suggested. Not right now, Percy said impatiently. Last night. Weren't you there? Harry asked innocently. No, I was busy, Percy said, looking a little embarrassed. With Penelope's? Harry smirked. That is none of your concern, Harry, Percy said stiffly, his ears reddening. I'm just teasing, Percy. I'm glad you have a girlfriend, Harry said sincerely. Thank you. Percy gave Harry a small smile. I'm going to be honest with you. You are a huge disruptive influence, and I'm fairly certain that I should at the very least dislike you. For some reason, I don't. Mum seems determined to make you a part of our family, as do Ron and the twins. You yourself don't seem all that opposed to the idea. As such, it always unnerves me when you do things like this and either put yourself in danger from vigilantes who want to stop you because they think you're the heir of Slytherin now or just outright hate you. I appreciate that, Percy, Harry told him. I'm not trying to worry anyone. I just think I know what I'm doing. You think? Percy repeated faintly. You think? Now I'm even more worried. You're a Parselmouth, Hermione exclaimed as Ron and Neville shoved Harry into an empty classroom. Harry really didn't want to have this conversation now or ever, but he was thankful his friends at least had the sense to make sure he wasn't overheard. So I announced last night, Harry said neutrally. Why didn't you tell us? Ron demanded, upset. He seemed to be even more worked up than he was last time, although it had been a while, so Harry wasn't positive. Perhaps it was because last time, even though Harry's unexpected ability was the same, this time Harry had known about it, what it was called, and exactly what being a Parselmouth implied, so it was more like he had been deliberately keeping this from them. That was all true, but Harry didn't think Ron would appreciate if Harry told him that he didn't feel like dealing with the hassle of telling him and having to worry about Ron keeping something this big under wraps. Ron would never purposely expose his secret, but he was also about as subtle as Voldemort, if less violent. Everyone always freaks out when they hear about it, Harry explained. And really, how often does the subject of talking to snakes come up in daily conversation? You'd think it would be something you might want to mention when there has been a basilisk going around petrifying people for the last few weeks. Neville sounded a little annoyed. I know, Harry agreed wearily. But it really isn't that big of a deal. I haven't been anywhere near the basilisk, and aside from occasionally hearing it moaning about how it wants to kill people as it rushes past me, I haven't seen any indication of her presence. Hers, Ron repeated. As Harry opened his mouth to explain, he shook his head. It doesn't matter. Don't you think that the constant petrifactions might count as a sign of the basilisk's presence? Neville asked rhetorically. This is a huge deal, Hermione insisted heatedly. Being a Parselmouth is what Salazar Slytherin was most famous for, Well, that and his being a pure-blood fanatic, Neville muttered to Ron, who grinned. Now the whole school is going to think you're his ancestor. Ron cried. Harry stared at him. Why would they go and think a silly thing like that for? Because it won't occur to them that it's possible to be a Parselmouth and not related to him, as Parselmouths are so rare? Neville put forth tentatively. I bet they're not nearly as rare as everyone makes them out to be, and anyone who doesn't want to get saddled with the label of Dark Wizard in training, which, true or not, would definitely be a bit of a setback, would make sure to keep that ability hidden. Harry disagreed. And that wasn't what I meant anyway. What did you mean? Neville asked, confused. I meant that unless they're all a bunch of morons, Harry began. Which you have a tendency to think anyway, Hermione cut him off. True. But unless they are even more hopeless than I had originally thought, they would not think that I am his ancestor, but rather his descendant, Harry finished. Unless they subscribe to some crazy time-traveling theory where I am my own great ancestor, or something. Kind of like the conspiracy theories in the Quibbler that you and Luna believe. Hermione asked innocently. Of course not, Hermione, Harry scoffed. Everyone knows you can't be your own ancestor. Really? Hermione asked, wondering how that was any more far-fetched than some of the other things she'd heard Harry, Luna, and occasionally Ron curse him for winning that lifetime subscription debating. How so? It's all about genes, Hermione, Harry began patiently. I don't expect you to know much about them, but you know what DNA is, right? Hermione nodded even as Ron and Neville started to look lost. Well, if you have a child, that child will have half of your genes, and by the same principle, if you have any grandchildren, they will have roughly a quarter of your genes, Harry continued. The likelihood of you contributing exactly the right half of your genes in order to match with the genes your partner is contributing is so low that the odds aren't even worth calculating. That makes it virtually impossible for you to be your own child or grandchild, although the probability does go up slightly after each generation. In any event, it would be a case of incest, and your family would be stuck in constant cycle if you went back in time and lived the rest of your life in the past. In my case, I also have the benefit of knowing that Salazar Slytherin is an established person, so even if no such person were to exist, I wouldn't choose that as a pseudonym. In fact, seeing as how it was over 1,000 years ago, I probably wouldn't bother with a pseudonym at all. I'm not quite sure I follow all of that, Hermione admitted. The girl was brilliant, but she was also only 12. You don't have to, Harry assured her. Just know that I'm right. That's a dangerous precedent to set, Hermione told him seriously. Then don't have this be precedent. Just this once, Harry said. That's how all these things start, Hermione countered. If you're not his descendant, Neville put extra emphasis on the disputed word so as not to have to endure any more of Harry's attempts to clarify. Then how can you speak Parseltum? Or, do you not know? I inherited it from Voldemort, and he's a descendant of Slytherin, Harry said casually. You're descended from, WHO? Ron shouted, shocked and horrified. Of course not, Harry said, looking sick. Can you imagine the likes of him reproducing? That's the stuff of nightmares, right there. But you just said Neville protested. What? So now I can't inherit something from someone I'm not related to? Harry demanded indignantly. Generally no, Hermione told him. Except if you're talking about Gringotts, but even then most people are related to each other anyway. As Harry continues to point out, Ron said, a little bitterly. Only when Draco's around, Harry said defensively. And besides, if you're going to be all nitpicky, then I'm not technically a Parselmouth. You can talk to snakes. That makes you a Parselmouth, Neville said bluntly. Oh, anyone can talk to snakes, Harry said dismissively. It's getting them to answer back that's the trick. But anyway, my scar, which I got from that killing curse Voldemort shot at me, is a Parselmouth. If I were to ever lose it, I would be completely unable to interact with British serpents. How could you possibly know that? Hermione demanded. Better questions. How could you lose a scar?
Easy.
Kill Voldemort, Harry said shortly. You're not making any sense. Again, Ron added as an afterthought. Whatever, Harry said, exiting the classroom and being almost immediately set upon by a small crowd of overeager Slytherins, all of them holding a snake. You guys go on without me. I might be a while.
Oi.
Harry, Fred called out. We wanted Dash. To let you know, Dash, George continued. How impressed we were, Dash. With your little stunt at the Dash. Dueling Club meeting, Dash. And we hope, Dash, that you continue to Dash. Always be around, Dash. To inspire Ickle Ronikins, Dash. To follow in your Dash. And thus our footsteps, Dash. As a first-class prankster, Dash. Master manipulator, Dash.
And brilliant businessman.
Harry stared at the Weasley twins who smiled back at him innocently. He wasn't fooled for a second. One of these days you've got to teach me that spell. What spell? They chorused simultaneously. Oh, come on, I'll do anything, Harry offered. Sorry, Harry, Dash. We'd love to help you, Dash. We really would, Dash. But we have no idea, Dash, what you are talking, Dash. About or what, Dash? You're smoking but, Dash. We're starting to think, Dash. We'd like to try some. I'll give you a startup loan on your joke shop, Harry promised. Fred and George exchanged glances. Do that and we'll talk. Justin. Ernie hissed urgently. What are you doing here? Justin, who had been working on a herbology project with Harry, looked apologetically at him before going over to where Ernie was trying and failing miserably to look inconspicuous behind a bookshelf. Harry himself waved merrily to Susan Bones and Hannah Abbott, who looked vaguely uncomfortable as they waved back and then returned to pretending not to listen to what Ernie and Justin were discussing. I'm studying, Justin said simply. With Harry Potter. Ernie was appalled. Really? I hadn't noticed. I probably should have guessed when he kept chatting about his scar and translated 3 separate conversations for a Slytherin and 2 Ravenclaws, Justin said sarcastically. You know what I mean, Ernie said impatiently. I told you to hide in the common room. So you did, Justin acknowledged. Then why aren't you? Ernie demanded. Because I had a project to do, Justin replied. You could have done it in the common room, Ernie said sternly. It was a partner project and Harry's not in Hufflepuff, Justin pointed out. Besides, letting him into the common room kind of defeats the purpose of hiding up there, doesn't it? Why are you working with Potter anyway? Ernie had taken to calling Harry by his surname once he decided that Harry was secretly evil after all. Well, not secretly per se, but rather blatantly evil. In fact, Harry was delighted that everyone who thought he was the heir was referring to him as Potter, and everyone else called him Harry, at his insistence, as he had some bad memories of people who hated him calling him Potter before making his life hell, because that way it was very easy to differentiate the mindless sheep who believed him from the mindless sheep who were ruled by fear. He supposed he really shouldn't think of the roughly 3/4 of the school who stood by him as mindless sheep, but he knew from past experience that they were only responding to his explanations and assistance in reviving the basilisk victims. It's not like we got to choose our partners, Justin said, rolling his eyes. You know that. You're paired up with Lavender Brown. You should have explained the situation to Professor Sprout Dash, Ernie began. What situation? Justin interrupted. The situation of Potter being the heir of Slytherin and attacking people for the hell of it and curing them for the publicity and to throw people off his track, Ernie replied matter-of-factly. Even if you were right, he has to work with someone, and unless you think that a half-blood like him with a muggle-born best friend is a pure-blood fanatic, everyone is at risk, Justin said reasonably. I'd still rather my best friend didn't insist on endangering himself trying to be all noble and Gryffindor, Ernie muttered sourly. That was uncalled for, Justin said, shuddering at the comparison. I know, Ernie said, looking sheepish. I'm sorry. Harry's always been so nice, though, Hannah said uncertainly, giving up all pretense of ignoring the 2 boys. And he made you-know-who disappear. He can't be all bad, can he? No one knows how he survived that attack by you-know-who, Ernie said, lowering his voice dramatically. You know who cast a killing curse at him. No one survives a killing curse, let alone a baby. Only a really powerful dark wizard could have possibly lived to tell the tale. I'm pretty sure Harry made some big announcement sometime last year about surviving because his mother sacrificed herself for him, Susan pointed out. Had he done that? Harry really didn't remember. Still, if he had, then that could only work in his favor in swaying more sheep. Oh, come on. He was a baby. What does he know about it? Ernie scoffed. I completely agree, Susan said pointedly. He was only a baby. How could he possibly be so evil that you know who himself had to come straight over and kill him? How would he even know that Harry was a devil child at that age? Well, Ernie trailed off, realizing that she had a valid point. I still don't buy the whole mother-sacrificing theory. I mean, is Lily Potter really the only person to have ever given their lives for someone ever?
She can't be.
How in the world is Potter the only one to survive? Maybe he's the chosen one, Justin snarked. Harry nearly choked. That wasn't too far off, actually, although hopefully that could be kept quiet for a few more years. But Ernie tried again. Just give it up, Ernie, Susan advised.
Fine.
Don't come crying to me when Potter petrifies you all, Ernie sniffed and began to storm away. If anything, he'd come after you for smearing his name, Susan called after him. Ernie's shoulders stiffened, and he started walking faster. If Harry did that, wouldn't everyone be suspicious of him again? Hannah asked. Justin shrugged. Probably. On the other hand, there's no need to tell Ernie that. And maybe now I can get back to my homework. Potter, McGonagall's voice rang out through the suddenly silent library several hours later. Yes, Harry asked politely. Has someone else been petrified? Indeed. Ernie Macmillan has been found right outside the Hufflepuff common room, McGonagall told him gravely. I see. Harry trailed off as something occurred to him. Mr. Potter's? McGonagall prompted. I have an alibi. Harry cheered, ignoring the death glare Madame Pants sent his way. Pardon? McGonagall asked, not understanding. Ever since that whole stunt I pulled at the Dueling Club, some people, Ernie being one of the most vocal, have been accusing me of attacking everyone. I never seem to have an alibi, but this time I was in here studying the whole time and have, 30 witnesses, Harry continued excitedly. Be that as it may, McGonagall said primly. A student was still petrified. Oh, he'll be fine, Harry said dismissively as he followed the Transfiguration professor up to the hospital wing. That may be true, but I would like to remind you that there is still a murderous creature on the loose, and it would not behoove you to be so glib, McGonagall said sternly. I know, Harry said. He glanced down at Ernie. Hey. I sold him that mirror, and he still blames me. That little... Harry, Dumbledore interrupted him. Hello, Professor, Harry said warmly. What are you doing here? I'm always concerned when there is a basilisk attacking my students, Dumbledore explained. That sounds like a good policy, Harry nodded. You have been almost extraordinarily helpful during this crisis, and I suspect that you are somehow involved in the iron curtain of secrecy protecting Hogwarts' problems from the wizarding world at large, Dumbledore said pleasantly. I do what I can, Harry said, his voice noncommittal. Let me begin by saying that I know that you have nothing to do with these attacks. However, I am quite curious. How do you know so much about the attacks? Dumbledore's eyes bore into him, and Harry was suddenly quite grateful Hermione had bullied him into mastering occlumency when they were 19. Well, she and all of his other friends were 20, but he had a late birthday. I've come back from the future, Harry deadpanned. Indeed, Dumbledore said, skeptical but intrigued. Oh yes, Harry nodded. Of course. When I'm from Ginny Weasley had the diary and was attacking only Muggleborns, Sirius Black was completely innocent of the crimes he was sent to Azkaban for, without a trial, and escaped next year. Draco Malfoy is the master of the Elder Wand, and Snape helps euthanize you. Indeed, Dumbledore said again, this time blatant disbelief evident in his voice. How did you come back, if you don't mind me asking? Drapery accident, Harry said shortly. It was very traumatic. Dumbledore sighed heavily. I wish you would be honest with me, Harry. Who says I'm not being honest? Harry asked rhetorically. But you can be assured that anything I'm not telling you is either for a very good reason, because I don't think it's relevant, or just because I don't want to deal with the consequences. That's rather discouraging, Harry, Dumbledore told him frankly. I don't know what else to tell you, Harry said, shrugging. How about the truth? Dumbledore suggested. The truth, Harry sighed, mimicking Dumbledore's response to Harry's plea for the truth in his first year. It is a beautiful and terrible thing, and should therefore be treated with great caution. That is most unhelpful, and I suspect deliberately cryptic, Dumbledore told him, sounding a little disappointed. Well, if it is, it's probably because I got that from a reticent and secretive to a fault old man, Harry said, grinning. If you should decide in the future to confide in me, my office is always open, Dumbledore told him sincerely. Thanks, Professor, Harry said, touched. I appreciate that. Chapter 20. So, Hermione said triumphantly the day before the term ended. We're not the only ones to think Malfoy is the heir of Slytherin. Yeah, ever since you had a bunch of witnesses when Ernie was attacked, everyone has been off your case and on his, Ron chimed in. It's really quite fortunate that nobody realizes I could have just ordered the basilisk to attack him beforehand, Harry mused. His three friends stared at him. But you didn't, right, Harry? Neville asked finally. Of course not, Harry scoffed. But the point is that I could have. I recommend keeping that bit of information to yourself, Neville advised. Or else people will never let go of the idea that you're responsible. Not that I don't fully support the idea that Malfoy is the heir, Ron began. But Harry, you're his friend. Merlin knows why, and shouldn't you be doing something to make people stop suspecting him? Harry grinned. That was a strange situation, all right. Normally I would, he agreed. On the other hand, Draco is a Slytherin from an old, dark, pureblood family. To him, being the heir of Slytherin is a badge of pride, and so even though he's not responsible, he doesn't mind people thinking he is. What's more, he's the one who came to me with the idea of making everyone think he's the heir, and I went along with it because the truth will come out soon enough and the teachers totally don't believe him anyway, so it's not like it really does any harm. If that's the case, why are you so sure he's not? Hermione asked reasonably. Or, as reasonably as one could be when espousing the theory that Draco Malfoy was the heir of Slytherin. He could be playing you, and just asking for help in taking the credit that he already deserves. You mean other than the fact that he's 12, not a Parselmouth, and thinks being able to attack people with a giant snake is wicked?
Harry asked.
Seriously, even Voldemort didn't go around setting the basilisk on Muggleborns until he was 16. Ron flinched. Stop saying that, he said, annoyed. Stop telling me not to say that, Harry shot back. It's not going to do any good, and getting into another argument about this with you will just make everything take twice as long. The fact that we're talking to you automatically makes everything take twice as long as it normally would, Neville pointed out. Then perhaps Ron should not be so eager to make everything take 4 times as long as it normally would, Harry said mildly. But that reminds me, I've got your Polyjuice. Now go away, and don't try to drag me into this. Hermione woke them up at the crack of dawn on Christmas morning, proving that she was indeed sadistic enough to be the daughter of dentists. You have 5 seconds to tell me what you're doing in here before I hex you, Harry growled sleepily. He and the rest of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, plus Lee, had just had their monthly all-night tournament. This time it was Exploding Snap, and since they wouldn't have Quidditch practice the next morning, Wood joined in for once. It was great fun, naturally, but unless Hermione had a good reason to be barging in there 20 minutes after he had fallen asleep, the Polyjuice potion is ready, Hermione exclaimed excitedly, bouncing up and down on the balls of her feet. Of course it's ready, Harry snapped, not a morning person under the best of circumstances. I gave it to you last week. Well, yes, Hermione admitted. But I thought we could use it today. Breakfast isn't for another 3 hours. How could we possibly hope to use it before then? Harry demanded. Then, realizing his mistake, he corrected, and by we I mean you. I still think this is stupid. I think half the things that you do are stupid. Hermione began heatedly. Only half, Ron muttered, covering his head with a pillow to block out the sunlight. Maybe she just doesn't pay enough attention, Neville murmured back, copying Ron's method of refusing to admit it was morning. But that doesn't mean I try to stop you, Hermione concluded. Since when have I been trying to stop you? Harry asked incredulously. I bought you the bloody potion. And let me tell you, that did not come cheap. And I'm sure you made the money back within 24 hours, Hermione said dismissively. Besides, you only helped so we wouldn't endanger our potions class. Oh please, Harry laughed. Like I couldn't have stopped that. The only reason it would have worked on Snape was because he didn't know you were planning it and would have undoubtedly have been busy with the other kids who were trying to kill each other. Right then, Hedwig flew in and dropped a medium-sized package on Harry's head.
Ouch.
Okay, that's it, Harry said determinedly. I don't care what day it is just too damn early. Out, all of you. But Harry, Hermione protested. The potion dash.
Out.
Harry shouted, waving his mind and banishing Hermione down the stairs. Thanks for that, mate, Ron said, snuggling deeper into his pillow. What part about all of you didn't you get? Harry asked, raising his wand again. But Neville began, horrified. Sorry, Harry said apologetically. But she won't stop until you guys go help her with that. It's good to know where your priorities lie, Ron muttered as he reluctantly got up. Yeah, well, I need sleep, Harry told him. Oh, but take this. Harry waved his wand at his trunk, and a vial with a few hairs floated out and into Ron's empty hands. What's this? Ron asked, inspecting it carefully. A few of Pansy Parkinson's hairs, Harry explained. Tell Hermione that Polyjuice potion should not be used with cat hair. How did you Neville began. Wait, don't answer that. Your scar told you, he said sarcastically. You know me too well, Harry said as he waved his wand once more to shut the curtains and went back to sleep. When Harry finally got around to getting up and opening his presents, he found that the Dursleys had actually sent individual presents. Uncle Vernon had sent him a cross and a note saying how he was going to hell for worshipping Satan and proving that once again he knew nothing about magic. Aunt Petunia had sent a book on gardening which he immediately gave to Neville, and Dudley got him a bunch of CDs which, due to the lack of electricity at Hogwarts and his own lack of a CD player, Harry strung up and hung around the common room, creating a cool rainbow effect when the light hit them. Harry had sent Aunt Petunia some rare but muggle seedlings, Dudley some magical sweets that would probably freak him out for about 20 minutes before he gave in, and ate them all within the day, and Uncle Vernon 20 galleons, so as to torture his uncle with the dilemma of exchanging his wizarding coins for muggle money or not accepting free money. This would probably agonize him for days. Hagrid sent him a large tin of treacle fudge, and Harry had sent him 6 Abraxan. Harry had decided pretty early on that he was going to celebrate the success of his money-making ventures by going all out this Christmas. Ron gave him Flying with the Cannons, which was an interesting enough read even if he despised that team. In turn, Harry had sent him a new wand. Hermione got him a luxury eagle-feathered quill, and Harry, so help him, gave her a time-turner. Fortunately, he also gave her a guide on how to use it straight from the Department of Mysteries itself. It really was nice sometimes that the Ministry was so corruptible, as Harry was almost certain that what he did was worth a good 10 years in Azkaban. The Weasleys had sent Harry a new hand-knitted jumper and a plum cake, and Harry had responded by purchasing them a house elf, something he was not looking forward to Hermione finding out about. It's not like he wasn't all for house elf rights. It was just that Dobby was the only house elf he had actually met who wanted them, and he figured he should probably stay away from enacting new magical creature legislation until he had at least graduated. Things like that were very time-consuming, as he knew from experience. And the Weasleys were in Egypt visiting Bill for Christmas. If they could afford that, then why was it such a big deal that they won the 1,000 galleon draw over the summer and went back? Maybe it was cheaper when it was just the 2 of them and not 7 of them. Ginny had gotten him some owl treats for Hedwig, and he had gotten her a year's supply of Honeydukes chocolate because he didn't know her as well as he might have liked. Fred and George had sent him several seemingly innocuous desserts that he was afraid to try without a lengthy examination and a possible guinea pig, and he had gotten them a book on inventing potions. He knew they could do it on their own, but this might make things go a little smoother. Tonks had sent him some of Sirius's old school books that he and Harry's father had written all over when they were supposed to be listening in class, and Harry had gotten her a rather expensive ring charmed with an anti-clumsiness spell for when she needed to be undercover once she finally got through aura training. Technically, he supposed she could wear it all the time, but he knew that Tonks had kind of liked being clumsy for whatever reason. Maybe she just saw it as integral to her personality? Percy had gotten him a book on the OWLs, which was just so typically Percy that it wasn't even funny, and Harry had gotten him a set of new school robes as Harry knew pomp like that was important to Percy. Neville had gotten him a book on poltergeists as apparently Harry was starting to remind him of one, and dear God, he was getting a lot of books. He could really sympathize with the headmaster's desire for a pair of nicely woolen socks now, and resolved to purchase some for himself at the earliest possible opportunity, and Harry had gotten him a couple gillyweed plants. Not that he was thinking ahead to 4th year, or anything. Cedric had gotten him a book of 1,000 Things I Never Had the Nerve to Do at Hogwarts, and a note remarking that Harry had already done 3 dozen. Needless to say, Harry now had a new ambition in life. Harry himself had sent Cedric a book on the history of the Triwizard Tournament complete with task analysis and a note saying, "You never know. But my scar does." Draco had gotten him a top-of-the-line broomstick serving kit, and Harry had gotten him the most extensive wizard genealogy in all of Europe. That probably wasn't the best plan if he wanted Draco to get over all of that pure-blood crap he kept spouting, but he knew Draco would love it, and it was Christmas. Luna had gotten him a pair of X-ray glasses that genuinely worked and looked just like his regular glasses, so he knew he'd have fun with being able to look even more omniscient than usual. It made him very glad he had hired 24 experience trackers to find her a crumple-horned snorkack, which turned out to be some sort of pig-like creature. He knew that would just make her day. He got Professor Dumbledore a pair of woolly mittens to go with his woolly socks, Professor Lockhart a book on calligraphy, so he could have fun making his signature even more elaborate, an anonymous grant for Professor Snape to continue doing research, and Professor McGonagall a brand new chess set, also anonymously. And of course, he sent the entire Hogwarts population a candy cane, and everyone who had expressed faith in him a box full of chocolate. By the time Harry was finished admiring his presents and deigned to leave the common room, it was lunchtime, and Harry was just in time for a quick bite to eat before he joined the traditional all-afternoon snowball fight. By the time that ended, it was dinner, and Ron, Hermione, and Neville were getting up halfway through the meal to go chasing after Crabbe and Goyle. "Feel free to just ditch me. It's okay, I don't mind," Harry called after them. "If you don't mind, then why are you yelling at them?" Luna asked, sitting down across from him and plopping his gift down next to her. "I like yelling?" "I'm sure you do. You make all school announcements in the Great Hall often enough." "Thank you for Norbert," Luna said breezily. "And Norbert?" Harry repeated. "Like the dragon?" Well, that was really a Norberta, but he wasn't supposed to know that yet. What were the odds that she would pick the same name as Hagrid? Although somehow he wasn't surprised. "Oh yes," Luna said serenely. "I asked Hagrid about name suggestions, and he got a little teary-eyed when Norbert came up, so I figured that would be a good name." "That's just, yeah," Harry said, not exactly eloquently. "Strange," Luna supplied. "Yeah, I get that a lot. For that matter, don't you?" she asked. "I do," Harry nodded. "What do you think about the theory that Draco Malfoy is the heir of Slytherin?" "That's ridiculous," Luna said instantly. "He would never write in a diary." "Diary? So that means that you believe me about a supposedly dead parent betrayer, illegal rat animagus, using Voldemort's old diary to open the Chamber of Secrets?" Harry asked, interested. No one had taken that part of his story seriously, even if they did believe him about the basilisk. "Of course," Luna nodded sagely. "It makes perfect sense." "Not to everyone else," Harry pointed out. "Most people don't believe in Norbert either," Luna countered. "Although they will after he makes the front page of the next issue of the Quibbler. Do you ever get frustrated in your attempt to educate the sheer, wizarding world?" Harry asked curiously. Luna giggled at his near slip-up. "Sometimes. But if we don't do it, who will? Everyone else is just content to be stagnant for the rest of their lives and live lives almost identical to their ancestors and their descendants. Do you know which is which?" Harry asked her, realizing that the question wasn't very clear and he should probably elaborate. Before he could do that, though, Luna answered. It is truly sad the state of the world when so many people don't realize that ancestors are those who came before and descendants are those who come after, Luna said, shaking her head pityingly. Where did your friends go? It was strange, but Harry and Luna never really felt the need to use transitional phrases. They just abruptly changed the subject, and the other one was expected to keep up. Again, very strange, but it worked for them. They are off to go drug Crabbe and Goyle in order to impersonate them and Pansy Parkinson, so they can go sneak into the Slytherin common room and try to worm a confession out of Draco, Harry explained. Drugging students? Couldn't they get expelled for that? Luna asked, interested. Probably, Harry acknowledged. Come to think of it, why hadn't Crabbe and Goyle gone to Dumbledore in the first place? Was it because they were embarrassed or didn't know who had drugged them? Was it because they didn't like the most prominent champion of Muggle rights, or had they simply not noticed they had been drugged? Sure, they could have thought they had fallen asleep, but he and Ron had taken their clothes and locked them in a closet. Although they could probably also get expelled from deliberately causing an explosion in potions class, which they were planning to do so they could steal from Snape. Another offense, until I stepped in and just bought them the damn potion. Polyjuice, right?
Luna asked.
At Harry's nod, she continued, wouldn't Draco Malfoy admit it because he wants people to think he is? Harry's blood froze. That had honestly never occurred to me. So, I guess you'll get a pretty interesting debriefing when they come back, Luna smiled.
Yeah.
And they will be even harder to convince of Draco's innocence than Ernie is of mine. What I really don't understand is this. Even if the heir was a student and a Slytherin, which is actually a reasonable assumption given the name, unless they were planning this from the beginning and wanted to deflect suspicion, why are they suspecting a second year? They should be looking for a culprit amongst the upperclassmen, Luna said sensibly. It had also amazed him just how sensible Luna could be sometimes. He had remembered her as the most bizarre person he knew, which was still true, but he supposed that since the wizarding world practically had a logic phobia and Luna was so very different than the mainstream wizard, it was almost inevitable that she would have to be simple, Harry laughed. He's the only Slytherin they interact with on any kind of regular basis, and he doesn't like them. Well, he's okay with Neville, but then Neville is a pureblood who doesn't buy Ron and Hermione's theory that he's the heir and is really just going along to keep them out of trouble. Ron thinks all Slytherins are evil and the Weasleys and Malfoy seem to have some sort of blood feud going on anyway. Hermione is a Muggle-born and Draco really doesn't have very much experience with them, and so there are definite problems there. Plus, he can't stand anyone who is so obviously smarter than him. I see, Luna said. That really makes no sense, though. Harry sighed. Preaching to the choir, Luna, preaching to the choir. And that's a wrap on Part 2. Chapters 11 to 20 of Harry Potter and the Masters of Time by Sarah 1281. The twists and turns are just getting more intense, with Harry and his friends facing even greater challenges. The story continues to unfold with time-bending mysteries and heart-pounding moments. Make sure to join us for the next thrilling installment as the stakes rise even higher. Dizzy, if you've enjoyed this magical journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter in this epic adventure. Thank you for being part of the Grimoire Audiobooks family. Stay tuned for more magical stories to come. Glowing Star.